The story begins with a creepy legend about the grave of a deceased princess, which frightened not only children, but also adults. This princess was from an ancient and powerful dynasty that was the ruling branch of times long past. Every year, on the same day, at the princess's grave, you can see the ghost of a girl in a red wedding dress walking around the cemetery. Her secret image frightens and fascinates at the same time, and her bloody smile and burning gaze inspires even greater fear and despair. They say that the girl died on that day, but her soul was never able to find peace, the dark-haired guy continued to say. He plans on this very day to go to the cemetery with a film crew to hold a virtual meeting of his subscribers with the spirit of the dead Red Princess. He will try to prove whether this mysterious spirit really exists or whether it's all just fiction and scary fairy tales for children, and subscribers will learn about this in his next video. The guy uploaded the recorded video to his channel and was looking forward to the reaction of fans and the addition of new subscribers. The young man's director also said that the promotional video has already been published on the internet and should appeal to viewers. He also said that only one day had passed since the upload, but the video had received more than 1 million views, and the guy really liked this information, who showed his unrivaledness with his entire appearance. The guy got up from his chair and finally said, as if addressing nothing, that it was a good job. Fong Ning once again thanked the director for the work done and also asked him to help him with filming a live broadcast in the cemetery, to which the director readily agreed, but was mentally angry because if it weren't for business problems, he would not have been involved in this nonsense at all. The film crew was also not thrilled with the location and they preferred the times when they were filming regular short videos and not jostling around the cemetery for illusory hopes of something interesting. Suddenly a cameraman, clearly worried about something, runs up to the director and tries to tell him something. The cameraman said that the hired actress would be a little late, to which the director got angry and told her to hurry up, because they did not intend to stay in this terrible place for a long time. The director added that it would be very incorrect to miss participation in the live broadcast and the operator completely agreed with him. There was noise and chaos on the set due to a violation of the planned algorithm, according to which filming should begin in 4 hours, so the actors and cameramen had to work at a pace. Fong Ning was happy that the filming would be carried out by such professionals and thought that his investment was very successful and if the broadcast was successful, he would remain at a good profit. The director, with feigned courtesy, approached Fong Ning to discuss work issues, but he declared himself a short break before the broadcast and thought that even if the legend turns out to be untrue, this terrible place will already gain a lot of views and the director left it, continuing preparations. There were 10 minutes left before the start of filming, but the actress did not appear, which caused serious concern among everyone present on the set. The operator said that he called her an hour ago, but she did not answer the phone and the director became even more angry, making it clear that upon returning from the cemetery everyone would receive a kick from him for their disorganization. Trying to somehow improve the situation, the director offered Fong Ning the role of an actress and still shoot the video to compensate for their efforts and time, to which Fong Ning was very surprised and did not want to agree. And then the director's patience ran out and he screamed and forced Fong Ning to change into the props and get acquainted with the script, showing that he had no right to screw up. The cameraman noticed something strange in the depths of the forest and asked them not to rush into filming until they figured out what was bothering him. A female figure in a red and black dress fluttered in the forest thickets, and bloody black crows flew around her. The film crew decided that the actress had finally appeared in disguise and Fong Ning would not have to play her role. A strange figure approached the guests of the night forest with its light, ghostly gait, and the feathers of its bird companions flew in the air. The cameraman could not understand when the actress managed to come and change clothes so quickly, and even the dress looked much more expensive than the one they took for the props. There was no time to wait and sort out the details, and if everything is already assembled, then it's time to finally start broadcasting. The director confirmed his full readiness to begin filming, but there was little time left for broadcast, so it was necessary to start immediately. Fong Ning was glad that everything had worked out and they would be able to film this video, so he prepared for the start in full combat readiness. The guy was full of energy and confidence and without hesitation announced the start of filming and headed to the set himself. A group of cameramen, led by the director, launched their professional cameras and spotlights and began filming what would happen. Fong Ning went live and was immediately bombarded with both positive and negative comments. He began to tell the legend about the princess's grave and that recently there had been more complaints about paranormal activity in this cemetery, which he had come to deal with. The guy really liked the circulation of people on the channel and he already imagined how much he would earn from this, and with this opinion he went to continue the live broadcast. He slowly approached the princess's grave, not foreseeing anything bad, while the audience supported him with their comments and shared their own impressions of this place. Fong Ning continued the story that the spirit of the princess appears once a year and it is on this day that you can see her wandering soul, eager to share her images and problems. At that moment, a strong frosty wind blew, which frightened everyone present on the site with its strength and was definitely not foreseen in the script. Strange things began to happen near the grave and the spectators were frightened by the mysticism of this action and unanimously began to call on Fong Ning to immediately get out of there. In turn, Fong Ning turned to the film crew and gestured that everything was going exactly as it should and interesting content was being produced. On the slope he saw an actress in disguise and was turning over in his head the further plan of action according to the script, and the meeting with the princess should be the culmination of this plot. At that moment, a once again concerned cameraman approached the director, but he waved him off, rudely answering that he had no time for empty talk. The director thought only about the popularity that this broadcast would gain and the current viewership rating, calculating his future income. According to the agreement, he would receive 10% of the income and thought only about wealth and fame, not paying attention to the nuances during this filming. The cameraman made another attempt to talk to the director, but his tone became even fiercer and he shouted at him to get away and not interfere if his salary matters to him. The director took the right one in his hands and said that according to the script, Fong Ning should already approach the actress for the final scene, and she, in turn, will also follow the plot. One of the operators mentally noted that there were not so many of them to consider the use of a walkie-talkie advisable, and from the actress's behavior he noticed that she was without an earphone, so she would not hear any instructions from the director. The wind rose even stronger and nearly blew everyone off their feet, making it difficult to continue filming the live broadcast. The operator frankly did not like this change in the weather and he felt some kind of ghostly energy from this place, which frightened him more and more with every second. He pointed his finger at the slope and said with horror that the actress had disappeared like a ghost and this was clearly not a planned course of events. The furious director said that this was how it should be according to the new script, which the actress received yesterday and she was just preparing for her exit. Having received a kick, the cameraman stepped aside while the director radioed Fong Ning that the actress would appear soon, as prescribed by the plot. Fong Ning heard the director's guidance and headed towards the slope, where the climax of the live broadcast with the participation of the spirit of the princess would take place. He stopped for a second and turned to the film crew with the words that he was a little frightened by a gust of wind and if before he did not believe in the power of the gods, now he is ready to change his mind. The guy still doubted whether the ghostly princess would appear or not, but until the last he did not lose hope. As Fong Ning approached the slope, the spectators were already seriously worried about the gust of strange wind and were worried about his integrity and well-being, assuring him not to approach the grave. Using one last attempt, the cameraman ran up to the director again, begging him to listen to him, since the information was very important and could change the course of events. Still in his angry manner, the director eccentrically swore at the cameraman to finally leave him alone, because he was frankly tired of his intrusive presence. No longer able to withstand such cruel treatment, the operator stuck the phone under the director's nose and said that he had contacted the actress and she said that she had slept through the filming and was apologizing. Stunned by this information, the operator changed his face and asked rhetorically with fear, "Is it true?" although he openly hoped that it was not and believed in it until the very end. Having finally realized the creepiness of the situation, he faded from the thought of who was on the slope then, if the actress did not come, and terrible thoughts crept into his head. He asked the same question again in the hope that someone would answer him, while Fong Ning got too close to the slope and could no longer hear their conversation. There was something cold and mystical in the air again, and Fong Ning did not stop until he reached the foot of the slope where the unknown figure stood. The mysterious figure of a blonde girl towered over him, sparkling with red hellish eyes, waiting for his next move, catching sight of his magical beauty. Fong Ning was seriously scared and, trying to get back, tripped and fell, but the filming did not end there and with trembling hands the cameraman continued to film this paranormal action. Although the guy still thought that it was just an actress and reassured himself that she really got used to the role, and without knowing the truth about the fictional legend, he would have thought that this was really the spirit of the princess. Numb with fear, he asked the girl who she was, as predicted by the script, but horror and anxiety became more and more noticeable on his face. In a panic, the director tugged at the cameraman's chest, knocking out of him at least some kind of answer to who this girl was if the actress was not here, but he could not say anything to this. Everyone was very scared that the legend might turn out to be true and they really saw the ghost of the dead princess instead of a fake actress. With trembling hands, the operator held the camera, but noticing something strange, he reported with horror that something was wrong with the girl's legs. He brought the tablet to his colleagues to show what he saw and to understand whether he was mistaken and whether he could just see it. Having made sure that this was all true, they were even more frightened by the realization that in front of them was not a person, but something otherworldly. Taking off from the ground, the girl hung in the air as if she had wings, while the audience celebrated the professional work of the actress, as they did not believe that this could be a real ghost. The director gradually began to understand that they had to meet with a real ghost, and the legend turned out to be true at their own peril and risk. They gazed at the girl's figure, still amazed that the spirit of the princess could really appear to them, and this was not a joke. Everyone present took turns trying to find some arguments about what was happening and mentioning any theories about ghosts, including the inability to see them through the lens and putting forward the possibility that it could be an alien. The ghost began to approach Fong Ning and he became even more frightened, warning him not to approach him, trying to find out who she was. As the ghost approached, the wind grew stronger and turned into a hurricane, and this inspired even more fear and chills, and Fong Ning shouted for the girl to stop approaching him, because he was afraid of what she might be capable of. He thought that the director approached the plot very responsibly and professionally, and everything looked surprisingly realistic, right down to the ants. Fong Ning looked at the girl and was surprised at how well, to the details, her image was chosen, from a high-quality suit to silver, silky hair, and he knew that he could earn quite a bit of money from such content. Having become somewhat accustomed to the surroundings, Fong Ning began to perform his part of the performance and, resisting the wind, leaned forward to meet the ghost. The guy pointed the light of a flashlight at the ghost, saying that he would no longer be surprised by any ghosts and he was not at all afraid of her. Having successfully performed his role, Fong Ning returned to the camera with a joyful expression on his face, showing that everything was going according to plan, but the audience was already beginning to doubt that in front of them was only an actress and not a real ghost. The film crew, who had already realized the truth of the legend, were frozen in horror that Fong Ning was acting so easily and calmly, still following the script without any clue that everything had gotten out of control. The image of the girl became even more frightening and the audience went crazy from the supernatural energy present there, which even through the screen inspired fear. The ghost stretched out its pale hands with sharp, long claws, trying to reach Fong Ning. The director shouted at him over the radio to immediately end the live broadcast and return to them, because most likely this was a real ghost. At this moment, the operator reported that there was some kind of communication failure due to strange electromagnetic activity and now they could not contact Fong Ning. The operator added that it was better for them to get out of here as quickly as possible before it's too late, because it is unclear what the consequences of their stay in this mystical forest might be. The atmosphere became tense and a terrible wind raged as Fong Ning dug to the top of the slope where the ghost princess was still located and the cameramen were still trying to maintain filming. It became increasingly difficult to withstand the magical pressure from the ghostly girl, and the film crew was surrounded on all sides by her powerful force. They were in despair of hopelessness and fell on their knees to beg forgiveness and mercy from the ghost and so that she would not kill them. When Fong Ning got too close, the ghost grabbed him by the throat with his bony hand and, it would seem, at that moment his end would come. Her strength and power were incredible and she lifted Fong Ning by the throat off the ground as if he weighed nothing to her. He felt that he was on his deathbed and her image was slowly etched in his eyes, as the last thing he would see before his death. And at that moment, the scarf flew off the girl's head, which blew with the subsequent gust of wind, revealing her silver hair. Revealing her face, the girl turned out to be amazingly beautiful with sad eyes and thick, beautiful hair that was exposed to the wind and developed in silver waves in space. Fang Ning was blinded by her beauty, and all her emotions turned into one crazy desire to contemplate this ideal image for the rest of her life. The viewers who were still on the live broadcast also turned out to be not indifferent to the dazzling beauty of the girl and wrote hundreds of comments about her unusual beauty. Fang Ning realized that the events were not unfolding according to the script and wondered where this girl got such incredible strength, because under her influence he could no longer breathe normally and felt like he was suffocating. Still holding the guy by the throat, they began to rise higher above the ground, and the spectators did not understand how this was happening without auxiliary cables or fastenings, still not fully realizing that the situation had gone beyond the expected scenario. Fang Ning realized that this was no longer a joke and the girl was really trying to kill him, and he could less and less allow himself to breathe at least a little air. The film crew continued to kneel prostrate in the hope of begging for the right to life and the opportunity to get out of here. Realizing that their requests were in no way working, they began to despair, mentally expecting death. The frightened operator shouted for the director to do something about it, but he despaired of his salvation and stated his helplessness in this situation. A tear of despair appeared on Fang Ning's face, and he understood that very soon everything would end and he would die at the hands of this charming, but at the same time terrifying girl. His head began to spin and Fang Ning felt like he was losing consciousness due to insufficient oxygen. Everything was as if in a fog and he fell into the abyss, which was the dying haze of his subconscious. A blinding light passed through his body, foreshadowing his imminent death, for which he was completely unprepared, being so young. And then he realized that his time had not yet come, and the light of life lit up in his eyes again, which could give hope for salvation. He gathered all his last strength into a fist and told the girl that she had no right to disrupt such an important broadcast for him, and he would not allow it. Fang Ning grabbed the girl's hand with all his might and she froze from this unexpected move, looking straight into his eyes. After that, the ghost let go of the guy and he fell to the ground, gasping for air while she still continued to tower over him in the air. He couldn't catch his breath for a long time and his throat hurt from the strong pressure, so he continued to sit on the ground, waiting for his breathing to recover. He wasn't feeling well and thought he was done for, given the disastrous shoot that was threatening his career. He angrily approached the girl with complaints about her behavior and that his death should not be part of the show, and she behaved unprofessionally. Fang Ning pulled himself together and took a deep breath, trying to reassure himself that he was on a live broadcast and everything had to go perfectly so that his efforts would not be in vain. Looking at the girl, he said that he did not expect to see a real ghost of the deceased princess in this resolution. While the shocked cameraman continued to film, Fang Ning once again got into character and began his line with words, that he had been lonely for a long time and if he was destined to die, then before his death he would like to do something that he had never dared to do. Addressing the audience, Fang Ning said that the girl's ghost looked like a beautiful flower bud and, holding his head with his hands, he could not get her image out of his memory. His eyes lit up with a crazy idea, and with his appearance he made it clear that he had made a certain decision for himself. With undisguised confidence, he went to meet the princess, realizing that no one expected this from him, which would interest the audience even more. Stopping in front of her, he got down on one knee and addressed the princess with an incredible feeling of tenderness. Fang Ning told her to give up her 1,000 years of loneliness for him and reached for something in his pocket. He took out a red box with a ring sparkling with precious stones, proposing marriage to the princess. With complete seriousness, he asked her if she agreed to become his wife, and from his self-confident appearance it was clear that the answer should only be positive. Everyone present on the site was shocked by this turn of events and stood with their mouths open in surprise. The audience was no less shocked by this and decided that the guy was out of his mind if he wanted to marry a ghost. Fang Ning only thought about his popularity, and this gesture was perfect for the climax of the plot of this video, so he did not think about the consequences. The princess was puzzled by this proposal and she asked again whether he really wanted her to marry him. Her eyes became bloodshot and she became very angry with Fang Ning, probably preparing a violent reprisal against him. The wind rose stronger for a second and she flew up to him and grabbed the hand in which he was holding the wedding ring. Fang Ning did not understand what was happening, because according to the script, the princess should have immediately run away after his confession and that would have been the end of it. The princess approached him and looked into his eyes so that there was almost no space left between them and you could feel her breath on your face. Still facing each other, the princess held Fang Ning's hand and together they took off from the ground, without taking their eyes off each other. The princess looked intently at the gem in the ring and asked the guy if he really came here to take it. Fang Ning didn't understand what was going on because he was still trying to stick to the script and there was actually no talk of any marriage. The princess was outraged that she had to wait for him for so long and be alone for thousands of years, so she went into a violent anger, accompanied by a strong storm. The bad weather became stronger, and the princess focused on the guy and waited for an answer to her question. At this moment, Fang Ning believed that the director used some kind of ultramodern special effects that could reproduce such strong gusts of wind, otherwise he could not explain this bad weather. The girl, who at first glance seemed very sweet and beautiful to everyone, turned into a real monster with hellish eyes that looked like hot coals and sparkling hatred for the guy who, in her opinion, abandoned her here for many years and completely forgot about her. The crew members were also caught in the magical storm and were thrown back with incredible, driving force. Flashes of fire mixed with the wind raged around, and this powerful force on its way did not spare anyone who came across it. From under the ground, near the place where the princess stood, as if from the depths of hell, an even more terrifying creature began to appear. It was a gigantic monster in a robe blazing with purple fire with hair that stood like flame tongues, and she stood behind the princess, who in her background seemed like just an angel. But at that second the princess began to distort and her pretty features changed to red and black spots, like those of a hellish demon, filling her pale skin with her flames. Under the influence of anomalous phenomena, the connection began to be lost and the audience could no longer see what was happening, and Fang Ning realized that no special effects were capable of this, and meeting with a real ghost in front of millions of people was not part of his plans, and his death during this meeting more. Fang Ning knew that he was not yet ready to die so young and without having earned a lot of money first, so he was not going to give up. Still holding the guy near her, the princess repeated with tears the same phrase that he left her, and she did not understand why and why. Fang Ning again fell into the dark abyss, losing consciousness from the magical influence of the princess. He found himself in a memory from childhood, when his parents left him with strangers and said that they would soon return for him, and he needed to be an obedient boy and wait patiently. Of course, no one returned on it, and he was reminded every day that no one needed him and that it was now his responsibility to do all the dirty work for the rest of his life, which greatly traumatized his little lonely soul. Every evening he fell asleep thinking about his parents, and most of all he wanted them to take him home, and he would always obey them in everything, if only they would come. He called them with tears in his eyes and begged them not to leave him in that terrible place, but his pleas were in vain and he was disappointed in his own parents, who doomed him to such a life. The guy looked at the princess with a knowing look and said that she was just like him, abandoned by everyone and needed by no one. He touched her forehead and began to calm her down so that she would not cry, since now she was not alone and he would support her. Taking a diamond ring out of the case, he affectionately took the girl's hand and placed it on her finger as a sign that his proposal was still valid. Fang Ning hugged the princess tightly and she felt relief and warmth that spread inside from his gentle touches. Unable to think of anything better, he said what she most wanted to hear, namely, that he had only come here to take her away. Her face began to take on its usual shape, the hellish image was replaced by a sweet face, and her eyes did not throw out hot sparks. But after that, with her magic, she raised Fang Ning high above her and he could not resist this in any way, waiting for her subsequent actions. From the strong male, he hit his head and blood flowed from his forehead, while a real hell of fire and wind raged around him. When he came to his senses, he saw the director and cameraman above him, who considered it a miracle that he had woken up after such a strong fall. Not fully understanding what had happened to him, he lay on the ground and listened as everyone took turns commenting on his condition and the miracle thanks to which he survived. He had a very bad headache and, without trying to remember anything, he asked those present what happened to him that night. Gradually regaining consciousness, he asked ere the ghost had gone, since he remembered her well and knew that they had seen each other yesterday at the grave. The crew members looked at each other in the hope that someone remembered, but it was likely that this was not the case. The director said that when there was a gust of wind, they all lost consciousness and no one can remember what happened after that. One of the operators wanted to check the camera, because it might have recorded what happened after they were turned off, but unfortunately, after a gust of wind, the broadcast was interrupted and the recordings were lost. And Fang Ning's mind ran through some memories, the image of the princess, the ring on her finger, but he could not gather them into something coherent and informative. We didn't torture ourselves for a long time. The guy gave up trying to remember something, but noticed that the princess's grave was terrifying only at night, and during the day it was an ordinary, nothing special place. The director decided to please Fong Ning with the good news that his channel had gained many new subscribers over the past night, and the income had exceeded any expectations. He also promised to send the recording of this video to the guy because it would help him gain even more fans, and this made Fong Ning happy. The guy said in response that the director now does not have to worry about anything, and he will receive his share of the income according to the drawn-up agreement, and hopes for cooperation in the future. It was time to leave, because they had been in the cemetery all night and it would be nice to rest after a successful job, and everyone agreed. The director happily asked his team if they were ready to go home, and everyone unanimously agreed with this proposal. A cozy but old-looking residential complex surrounded by green trees was bathed in the rays of the dawn sun. A taxi drove up to the house and Fong Ning got out, hurrying home after a very difficult and eventful night incident. Closing his eyes, with a tired gait, he climbed the stairs of the house, heading towards his apartment. Having reached his house, he sat down at the door and took the key to the apartment, which lay under the doormat. He opened the door, in the corner of which there was a cobweb hanging like lace, to which the guy was completely indifferent. Walking inside, Fong Ning felt such a long-awaited atmosphere and comfort of the house, bathed in the sun's rays. He pulled out his favorite drink from the refrigerator and enjoyed its taste and inner peace. Having finished his Coke, he quickly threw the can into the trash can and, of course, hit his target. After that, he lay down on the bed and tried to fall asleep. Although the sun flooded the entire room, it did not bother him, and his fatigue was stronger than the influence of external factors. But his attempts to sleep were useless, and every time he looked at the statistics of his channel after the broadcast, and the results made him very happy and he would finally become popular. There was crazy chaos in the comments about his personality, and the video flew to the top, which promised him long-awaited recognition and fame. Lying on the bed, he still could not forget the image of the ghost girl and reproached himself for having never even learned her name. After sleeping, he still felt tired and was haunted by the thought that the princess might pursue him after he proposed. He drove away these thoughts from himself and wanted to continue to live his ordinary life, convincing himself that the princess's soul was probably tied to her grave and she would not be able to come to him. Looking further for any arguments, he put forward the theory that she continues to rest in her grave and will only be able to appear in the world of the living next year on the day of her death. Having calmed down about the princess's soul, he switched to thoughts about his popularity and promising earnings from blogging. Fong Ning fell back into sleep, completely unbothered and not foreseeing any trouble, but the story did not end there. He slept until late at night, when hundreds of bright stars appeared in the sky, led by the young moon, illuminating the blue sky with its dazzling light. The guy woke up from a strange feeling, as if something was wrong, and gradually regaining consciousness, he realized where he was now. He reached for his phone to check the hour and make sure he had actually slept as long as he thought. While searching by touch for his phone on the bed, he came across some strange fabric that clearly should not be in his bedroom. He began to realize that she felt very familiar to the touch, and the most terrible thoughts began to swirl in his head, which he tried to drive away from himself. But his greatest fear turned out to be reality, and the same princess to whom he confessed last night appeared before his eyes. In her outfit, she looked like an angel, and each step she took left a trail of fragrant flowers as she approached Fong Ning's bed. He again felt like a small child who did not understand what was happening and looked at the princess with a questioning look, expecting some kind of explanation. No matter how he tried to adequately explain this situation to himself, he shouted out that he was probably still sleeping and this was just a nightmare haunting him. Drawing a conclusion from this, he said that he probably thought a lot about it, which is why he ended up in such a realistic dream. Adhering to this opinion, he argued that if it was his dream, then he could control it, and began to convince himself that in fact he was not seeing any ghost. Fearfully opening one eye, he wanted to see his tactics work, and the ghost of the princess disappeared from his dreams. But she didn't go anywhere and, sitting opposite Fong Ning, looked in surprise at how he was trying to drive her away, although this was not a dream. Fong Ning saw that his words were not helping and cried out, "Why doesn't she disappear?" as he wants in his head. The princess continued to look at him, not understanding why he was making this performance with her expulsion. Maddened by the presence of the ghost, Fang Ning tore out his hair in a vain attempt to wake up from this surprisingly realistic dream, chalking it up to excessive fatigue and the inability to cope with his own subconscious. Another idea arose in his head on how to check whether he was sleeping or not, having once read that you need to pinch your finger. According to this theory, if a person is sleeping, he will not feel anything, and if not, then everything that is now happening in his room is the pure truth. In the wilderness of the dead of night, an eccentric scream was heard throughout the street, coming from Fang Ning's apartment, and it could be heard, it would seem, even a kilometer away. The guy screamed from the wild pain that he inflicted on himself, while the princess sat next to him and was surprised at his behavior, but in a completely calm tone asked what he was doing. Having tried all the methods, the young man began to realize that after all, this was not a dream and he needed to realize the reality of this situation. He touched the princess to make sure that she was actually here and quite real and not an invention of his subconscious. The guy was seething with a storm of emotions that he could no longer restrain and, screaming, heading towards the princess, he asked where she had come from, scared to the core because she had come for him in reality. But the princess gently took his hands in hers, so that his heart trembled and he began to doubt it, that she had come to kill him. Meekly looking into his eyes, radiating magical beauty, she said that she had come just to see him. Fang Ning had mixed feelings about her words because they didn't even get to know each other properly enough for her to come to him. She still held his hand and said in her defense that her visit was subject to the fact that after his confession he became her husband. Realizing that the princess did not pose any threat to him, Fang Ning began to think that the princess really wanted to become his bride and did not intend to kill him. But she was angry that he seemed to have forgotten yesterday's events, and his explanation had no serious implications, although she had been waiting for him for hundreds of years. Fang Ning was taken aback by this information and began to retract his words, in the hope that she would understand his true intentions of only gaining popularity and not getting married on live television. But she was not satisfied with this answer and it stirred up her thousand-year-old anger, which sank like a wave towards Fang Ning, raging with a terrible wind. The guy was seriously afraid of her magical power and how easily she could destroy him, so he began to consider the option of peaceful negotiations. With feigned politeness, he plunged into the conversation, saying that he had not forgotten about his confession, trying to somehow smooth out the situation. Seeing that the contact between them was beginning to improve, Fang Ning unobtrusively began to remember her name, although he actually did not know it. She told him her name, and he, in turn, pretended that he had simply forgotten it and, upon hearing it, immediately remembered it. He was willing to go along with whatever she said to save his life, so he didn't think much of it. But after taking a good look, he again saw how beautiful she was, but the thoughts that he had been lonely for so long that looking at the ghost did not leave him. He started a sensitive conversation with her about how she could find his house if her grave was far away from here. She pointed to her feet, showing that he can move without touching the ground using magic. Trying to prove to him her mystical origins, she flew up to him on the wings of a magical wind. As if into empty space, the princess disappeared before the guy's eyes, losing her fragile record. Fang Ning didn't understand what happened and where the princess had disappeared to because she was no longer in the room, and it looked even crazier. He looked around his room, in the hope that she is somewhere here and her sudden disappearance cannot but carry with it any consequences. But soon, Fang Ning realized her location because her image emerged from his own body, which made him wildly terrified. She emerged from his form as if from water, and his horror surpassed any emotion, because he felt her spirit seeping through his body. He was still surprised by her maneuver, while the princess fell to the floor from unexpected contact with the surface. She tried to understand what happened to her and the reason for her unexpected fall, when she constantly moved without problems to this incident. Fang Ning could only admire her beauty when he finally realized that she had no hostile intentions towards him. The princess wanted to get to her feet, although it's unlikely that it would have worked the first time after hundreds of years of weightlessness. Her steps were gentle and careful, and she little by little began to remember these sensations when you walk on the ground and touch something hard and long forgotten. The first attempt to get to her feet was futile and the princess fell to the ground with all her might while Fang Ning watched her. Fang Ning tried to find the reason for her failure and suggested changing clothes, because in his opinion it was extremely inconvenient to move around in such an outfit. The princess began to think about his proposal, looking for expediency in his words about her clothing not being comfortable for her earthly stay. Having made a decision, the girl began to use her magical abilities to create a new image that would be better suited to restoring the ability to walk. Fang Ning watched as she carried out her planned act, attracting magical abilities to create wind and fire. He was surprised that she had otherworldly abilities and mockingly thought that she was capable of using transformation magic. But after all the magical manipulations, the princess found herself completely naked, having removed her heavy, majestic outfit. Fang Ning was taken aback by her image and pestered her by asking her to change into something, and not just take off her clothes. But she did not understand his reaction and only noticed that his nose began to bleed while maintaining an innocent image. Fang Ning quickly reacted and threw his shirt to the naked girl so that she could somehow cover her body from his eyes. He turned away from her so that she could get dressed, and he said that it was most likely her manipulation to seduce the young guy with her attractive young body. Still looking away from her, Fang Ning asked if she had already changed her clothes, to which she received an approving response. He timidly turned his head in her direction and saw her slender legs, which were not covered by his shirt even to the middle of her thighs, which looked very attractive. The princess noticed that the skinny guy's clothes fit her very tightly, hugging all the features of her feminine figure. Fang Ning rushed to the hairdress to fasten the last button on the shirt that could at least slightly cover her charms. Having completed his mission, he again became preoccupied with his well-being and worried about losing too much blood. The princess was clearly too tight in Fang Ning's clothes and the buttons on her chest were almost cracking from the pressure of the voluminous shapes. Fang Ning noticed her discomfort and said that his clothes probably didn't suit her very well and asked the biggest question that worried him was whether she would now constantly pursue him as her husband. The princess answered without objection that now she would only be where her husband was and if he asked her for anything, she would certainly do it. Fang Ning held his head, struggling with the thoughts that a ghost from a famous legend was really standing in front of him and was quite realistically having a conversation with him. He came to terms with this thought and began to perceive reality as it was, without trying to justify it with a game of the mind. The guy decisively crossed the room, heading somewhere with the words for the princess to follow him. Fang Ning thought that if she said that she would do whatever he asked, then it must be so, but no one ruled out the possibility that the ghosts were also lying. At the other end of the room there was a door into which our main characters headed at Fang Ning's request. The princess was interested in everything that surrounded her and every detail was a true discovery for her, including the mirror in which she could see her reflection. Fanon began to delicately explain to her the purpose of their stay in this room, but before that he asked again whether she would really do everything he asked. The girl unconditionally agreed that she would now do whatever her husband asked. Realizing that this was true, he began to think about how he would use it in his life. He smiled and told the princess that first he intended to teach her something and that's why they were in this room. Of course, the princess did not understand what he was talking about and sweat appeared on her face from worry about what he would say next. Fang Ning picked up a toothbrush and said that if the princess now lives with him, she must definitely learn to brush her teeth like all ordinary people. He promised that he would buy her a personal brush and a glass later, but for now he would show her how it was done, and described the step-by-step algorithm for squeezing toothpaste onto the brush. It was wild for the princess to watch his actions as he continued to do such an everyday and ordinary thing, accompanying each movement with an explanatory text for him. While Fang Ning was holding the brush in his hands, the princess ran up and grabbed it with her mouth to try it herself, how it all happened according to him. Fang Ning was puzzled by her gesture and it turned out to be a very wrong act for him based on the rules of personal hygiene. Although the princess did not know what she had done, something was wrong and smiled sweetly, still holding his brush in her mouth. She began to make the same progressive movements as Fang Ning had shown, waiting for approval from him whether she was doing everything correctly. He just looked at the not crazy look with the words that it was his brush and her act was equivalent to an indirect kiss, using it immediately after it. The princess swallowed water from the glass that Fang Ning was holding to rinse her mouth after the paste, and the guy was surprised that she learned everything so quickly and remembered what and how to do the first time. They continued to stand in front of the mirror as the princess examined her reflection, continuing her newly mastered morning routine. Fang Ning just stood and watched her without letting go of the glass of water, waiting for the princess to finish her business. She turned to face him and tenderly asked in a thin voice if she was doing everything right. Fong Ning found her treatment surprisingly sweet and gentle, especially when she was still wearing his clothes, and he liked it. He was glad that she learned so quickly what he showed, as if she were a small child who needed to be shown everything for the first time. But he also warned her never to take his personal brush again, changing his gentle tone to a more rude one, which she definitely understood and listened to. In addition, he said that if she still planned to stay with him, she should wait until he bought her a new brush, while carefully washing his used brush. The princess politely thanked the guy for his concern and apologized for the possible unintentional discomfort this morning had caused. Fong Ning stroked her hair and told her not to worry about it because he had forgiven her, but asked her the reason why she wanted him to be her husband and treated him so well. But the princess could not answer his questions, since she herself did not know her, but only remembered that he should be her husband, but did not know why, because she was simply drawn to him without any obvious reasons. The girl herself was embarrassed by her answer, because all this time she was guided only by her emotions and inner feelings that attracted her to Fong Ning. She also added that it seems that she must find something very important, but does not yet know what exactly. She was saddened by the fact that she didn't remember anything and found it difficult to understand what exactly made her want to be around Fong Ning. She theorized that it must be somehow connected to her head, otherwise there would be no connection between her attraction to Fong Ning. Putting his toothbrush in its place, Fong Ning listened to the princess and could not believe the magical connection between them. He objected that this was not the best place to discuss such important topics and asked the princess to return to the room while he went to the toilet. Fong Ning replayed her words in his head and tried to figure out why she didn't remember the mission she needed to complete and what could have caused her memory loss. Suddenly he felt a strange feeling of someone's presence in the room, and this greatly alarmed him, because there should have been no one there except him. He turned around and saw the princess next to him, looking into his pants with incredible curiosity while he relieved his physiological needs. He felt funny at her and at the fact that she had so shamelessly appeared before him in the toilet, and he asked what she was planning to do. The princess argued her appearance by saying that she simply came to wait for her husband, and this is completely normal behavior. The guy was embarrassed in front of her and he held on to his pants, so she didn't see anything unnecessary while she was looking so closely and obediently, waiting for him to finish. Fong Ning became angry with the princess because she did not listen to his request to stay in the room and rudely pushed her out the bathroom door. He shouted through the locked door for her to wait outside for him and not disturb his privacy, but she was greatly offended by this. Finally relaxing alone, Fong Ning easily finished his business in the toilet without outside influence. He was confused by hundreds of thoughts about the girl, and he doubted that she was actually as defenseless as she seemed, and perhaps when she achieved her goals she would show her true essence, but first of all he needed to think carefully about everything before making a decision. Despite all the bad things, he still thought she was nice enough, and it was nice that she called him her husband. But, on the other hand, he thought that ghosts cannot be with people, and he was not ready to undertake such feats and be the first who agreed to live with a ghost. His best solution was to simply force her, by all possible means, to leave him as quickly as possible, and everything would be as before. With this thought, he went to the room where Princess Jiang was sitting to try to realize his plan for her. But as soon as he crossed the room, he saw something very strange, which made him squint his eyes and wilt for a minute. The princess was lying on his bed, holding a book in her hands and intently looking at the pictures, reaching almost to the middle. Fong Ning realized that she had taken out his magazine, which no one should have seen, and he was angry with her for taking out his things without permission. He quickly jumped onto the bed to take away his magazine, but the princess flew into the air and left the guy empty-handed. The guy fiercely asked her where she got this magazine from and how she could even notice it when he tried to carefully hide it. The princess continued to look at the magazine carefree while she fluttered in the air at a height inaccessible to Fong Ning, reporting that she had found it under the bed. She wondered why all the characters in this magazine were naked and whether she needed to do the same for him, like his other possible wives from this magazine. Fong Ning's face turned crimson at the words that she also proposed to undress and be like the women on the pages. He again tried to snatch the magazine from her hands, making excuses that he had it by accident and was simply forced to buy it on the way to the store, but Fong Ning thought that the princess deliberately found it to make him feel awkward. She continued to look at the pictures and asked Fong Ning the meaning of each of them and what the people in these pictures were doing and why. Finally, Fong Ning came out to take the magazine and he angrily shouted at the princess that she should not read such things, showing all his anger about this incident. He hid the book in the place where it was and warned the princess not to take his things again without permission. The princess was not offended by his aggression and angry tone, but simply agreed with everything Fong Ning said, smiling sweetly. Fong Ning calmed his nerves a little and in a calm tone reminded the princess of the conversation they had had in the bathroom the day before. The princess flew so close to him that she was almost close to his face and Fong Ning did not know what to expect from her next. She openly stared at the bulge in his pants, which made him blush and feel embarrassed, and he told her to stop staring at him. But the princess was guided by her curiosity and, remembering various intimate pictures from the magazine, tried to check whether the men really had everything as in these pictures. She didn't wait long and began to act, getting closer and closer to Fong Ning, burning with her newfound idea. The girl directed her hands to the fastener on the guy's pants and he screamed from the surprise that the princess was preparing for him, shouting words of protest. She told him that she was following the instructions from the book and ordered Fong Ning to undress as shown in the pictures. He didn't understand why she was tearing off his clothes and asked him to stop and ordered him to finally forget about that damned book and leave her alone. But the princess only tried to please Fong Ning as best as possible and said that it was all for his sake and she must fulfill her marital duty. For him, this information was shocking and he refused it in every possible way, because they had just met and this duty was out of the question. He tried to distract her from his plan and said that he only wanted to talk to her to begin with, but in fact he was very scared that his virginity was in danger and everything could happen so quickly and unexpectedly. But he was also aware that if she did not stop her attempts to undress him, he would not be able to resist it for long and he would have no choice. Mixed feelings raged inside and Fong Ning looked at the girl as she sat carefree on his bed. She looked back at him and he didn't know how long their silence would last, because the atmosphere was already tense enough and he didn't want to drag it out. He realized that starting a conversation was not the best decision at the moment, because it raised even more questions that were not always answered. Fong Ning continued speaking, drawing attention to the main problem and asked the princess what exactly they needed to find. The princess, as if she ignored these words and, thinking only about what she saw in the book, realized what exactly she was doing wrong, that Fong Ning did not pay due attention to her, because in the book everyone was without clothes and a new one was formed in her head. Plan. She happily began to carry out her plan and began to give in front of the guy, believing that this time she was doing everything right. Fong Ning was shocked by her behavior and that she had taken up her duties again, although he believed that the topic of marital duty had long been closed and they had moved on to discussing more serious topics. The girl did not pay attention to his reproaches and was completely ready for what was supposed to happen between them as between a man and a woman. She approached him in a half-unbuttoned shirt, asking if he liked her body, gradually exposing her shoulders. They were too close to each other and this unhidden tension filled the entire room, which made Fong Ning even more embarrassed. With furious irritability, Fong Ning threw the first thing that fell into his hands to the girl, so that she would immediately get dressed and stop this clownery. It was still dark outside the window and only the light from Fong Ning's room could slightly dilute this darkness, waiting for the first dawn rays of the sun. Of course, the girl listened to Fong Ning and began to pull on her clothes while he stood with his back to her, warning herself against the images of her naked body. He turned his head slightly to ask if she had done it and repeated again so that she would finally forget about this ill-fated book. Fong Ning's clothes were too big for the girl's fragile body, but still it was better than anything and she did not argue, only agreed not to talk about the pictures from the book anymore. Fong Ning had an idea as to why the princess couldn't create new clothes for herself using magic, but she replied that she couldn't create things out of thin air. She inhaled the smell of the blouse that Fong Ning gave her and tenderly said that it was the smell of her husband and there could not be better clothes for that. Fong Ning became even more angry and shouted back at her to stop sniffing his clothes because he didn't like it. The princess sadly stopped this, and he continued to add up all the facts and added that after all, a ghost could capture the camera lens. Trying to test the veracity of this theory, Fong Ning asked Jiang Li whether it was actually a ghost or not. The girl looked at him in surprise, as if he was out of his mind if he believed that she was some kind of ghost. She denied his ridiculous invention about ghosts in her face and he was confused, not knowing what to think next, but curiosity won and he asked who she really was. Fong Ning did not receive an answer, because the princess stood silently and looked at him, as if hiding something very important, or very terrible. Now he was tormented by thoughts of what the girl's soul had turned into and what she was, although his main task was to get rid of her as quickly as possible, despite where she came from. He thought that if he helped her find the lost thing, she would calm down and leave him, so he began asking for details in order to better understand what was going on. The princess said that she did not remember what exactly she had lost, but now she was more worried about the feeling of hunger, which she told Fong Ning about. Still adhering to the theory that the girl was a ghost, he was surprised that she was also hungry, but told her to follow him to the kitchen. Fong Ning's refrigerator was quite empty, and offering something to his guest turned out to be more difficult than he thought. Glancing around the empty shelves of the refrigerator, holding the girl by the sleeve, he wondered whether ghosts could even eat human food. In a separate corner lay a lonely gingerbread, and having no other choice, Fong Ning handed it to the girl with the words that this is the only thing that must therefore be patient. The princess took the gingerbread in her hands and began to touch and examine it, as if she had seen something like that for the first time in her life. Suffering from hunger, she was forced to taste it, although she had never tried such a thing before. After biting off a small piece, the girl gave the gingerbread back to Fong Ning, saying that she definitely couldn't get enough of it. Fong Ning was taken aback by this information and began to think about what she should eat to restore her energy if human food did not suit her. He calmly asked her taste preferences, worried that she fed on sucking human energy and he would become her closest victim. She remained silent to his question and simply headed towards the window that had opened in the room, as if looking for an answer in it. Looking out the window, she told Fong Ning that she smelled something tasty not far from home, and he couldn't understand what exactly she was talking about and what was tasty for her. To see for himself, the guy looked out the window, looking at the surroundings in the hope that he would also see what the princess was talking about. At that moment, she came up behind him and put her magical hands on his shoulders, and the guy felt that this was not good. She grabbed him tightly and they flew out of the window, a second later finding themselves above the night city like weightless winged birds. But Fong Ning had no time for landscapes and he was terribly scared. He touched the princess, he also began to shine with magical light, like her, and still could not understand what was happening to him and where they were flying. Fong Ning tried to shout out to the girl and find out where she was taking him, which was like a kidnapping, and he didn't even have time to put on his shoes. They rose high above the ground, and against the dark background of the night sky their flight looked like the trail of a burning comet. Fong Ning was still wearing shoes, but he thought that perhaps this way he could force the princess to take him back to the apartment. This spontaneous flight did not remain without a trace for the guy, and he vomited under the first tree he encountered. Having rested a little, he asked the girl about the place to which they had flown, since he had absolutely no idea where they were. But having examined the area on his own, he was seized by panic from this creepy and suspicious place. He could only silently follow the girl, who probably knew what she was doing and why, but a chill ran down the guy's back again and he felt uneasy about this location. They approached a building that was nearby and looked like a university or school, although in an abandoned state. Having found a sign with the name of this institution, Fong Ning could not remember where exactly he had heard about this elementary school, although he was sure that he had certainly known something about it before. The yard of this school looked like a dump of broken and unnecessary things that were simply thrown to the ground like some kind of scrap metal. Fong Ning decided to look at his location on his phone in order to at least somehow navigate the space and understand where he was. This place turned out to be very familiar to the guy, because he had heard about this village in the news and now he will also know where it is. He was alarmed by the fact that although this place was only a few kilometers from his home, he had never seen anyone come here. He heard a story that once there were plans to build an amusement park here, so the land was bought out and the residents had to leave their homes. But during construction, paranormal phenomena began to occur and subsequently all the builders were found dead, after which this place became an abandoned landfill. Remembering this terrible story, Fong Ning felt uneasy and he carefully asked Jiang Li why they came here. She happily replied that there was something tasty inside this building and the guy was even more surprised what it could be. Fong Ning felt that this place exuded energy similar to hers and thought that she probably wanted to enjoy some kind of evil spirits. He tried to refuse to go with her to this terrible place and wanted to wait for her outside, but she rejected this idea with the argument that she could not go far from her husband. She approached him and touching his shoulder asked him to leave with her so as not to move away from each other. But in fact, she didn't need his consent, because she was pushing him towards the door with force, and then he realized that she would not back down, so there was no choice. Jiangli hugged his shoulders in anticipation of the delicious dinner she planned to share with her new man. Fang Ning continued to search for information on his phone and found several articles about the disappearance of school students in this village. The first case was the disappearance of 6th grader Lian Xiang, whose parents immediately contacted law enforcement agencies for help. The rescue team searched the school and all its surrounding areas, but found no traces of the girl, as if she had simply disappeared. However, a month later, the girl's mutilated body was found in the middle of the corridor of the educational building, which frightened both children and teachers. They began to investigate the crime scene, and upon autopsy of the girl's body, it turned out that her death occurred no earlier than a month ago, but no traces of the reason for the appearance of the body in the body could be found. Some time later, another incident occurred and the primary school principal was found hanged in his own office. After this, supernatural phenomena began to occur more often and the school was forced to close, blocking the road to it. Fang Ning looked through these terrible events and clearly decided that nothing good should be expected from this place, assessing their supernatural nature. The guy tried to explain to the girl that something terrible had settled in this place, but she did not react to his words, exclaiming only that it was delicious. They continued to walk towards the entrance and Fang Ning openly did not like this idea and suggested returning as if she would actually listen to him. At his request, she irritably fixed her gaze on him, allowing no objections, and the guy tried to turn it all into a joke, as if he really didn't want to get away from here. Fang Ning thought that he should not trust her completely, even though she looked stronger than anyone he had seen before. Gathering all his will into a fist, he opened the school door with all his strength, trying not to look as scared as he really was. The lonely corridor was covered with a lace of cobwebs that filled every free corner of this abandoned building. Now the owners of this dump were mice and rats, which, when unexpected guests appeared, fled to their holes. Our heroes walked down the corridor under the light of the flashlight on Fang Ning's phone in search of an unusual treat for Jiangli. Finally, the girl felt something and ordered her to head up the stairs, which the guy didn't like even more. But without arguing with the girl, he silently began to climb the stairs, because there was no point in resisting. And so they reached their goal and found themselves on the top floor of the school, where signs with the names of the rooms were placed, which were easy to navigate. Moving along the corridor, at the very end one could see a sign informing about the owner of this office. At that second, Fang Ning understood that this is where they are heading, and this after he told the terrible story of the director's suicide in this office. He was completely right about Jiang Li's intentions, and they were indeed going to the infamous suicide cabinet. Jiang Li was the first to rush into the office in search of something tasty, followed by Fang Ning, lighting her way with a flashlight. The guy carefully observed what Jiang Li found tasty in this particular office and was surprised at her choice. The girl stopped in front of the desk and stared intently at one of the objects placed there, which surpassed anything Fang Ning could imagine. He picked up the very comb chosen by Jiang Li and examined it to understand what could be tasty in this thing. It was surprisingly cold to the touch and smelled of something strange and mysterious, although it looked like an ordinary hair comb. At that second, the girl snatched the comb from Fang Ning's hands, looking at him with amazing appetite, licking her lips. Then real magic happened, because the girl secretly began to extract all its otherworldly energy from the comb. Having completed this ritual, she spat out the item that was no longer suitable for her back into Fang Ning's hands, receiving everything she wanted from her. There was a clear feeling of enjoyment on her face from such a delicious snack in the form of magical energy. She constantly repeated how delicious it was to her, but Fang Ning could not understand how exactly she could satisfy her hunger and asked her about it. The comb that Fang Ning was still holding in his hands no longer smelled as cold as the day before, and the girl said that she had eaten the power of the soul that was hiding in this comb. Fang Ning was in incredible surprise at her words, and she continued to happily chirp that the feeling of hunger no longer bothers her. The guy still thought that Jiang Li had absorbed the power of the comb's soul and thought that there must be some mystical evil in this school, but his thoughts were interrupted. The girl turned to him that she felt the presence of something else tasty, but did not yet know where exactly it was. He said that he agreed to look for this delicacy with him, and they headed towards the exit from the office. It was a little scary for him to be here, especially after reading all those scary stories, but he and Zhongli went in search. The idea arose in his head to film the search for paranormal phenomena and use this situation for his own purposes. Having considered all the pros and cons, he came to a decision on how it could all be arranged and rejoiced at his ingenuity. He offered to make money on the fact that they were here now and record a video about the presence of mystical phenomena in this school. For Zhongli, the concept of making money was new and unclear, so she waited for Fang Ning to explain his plan in more detail. He moved on to the creature and asked if she could locate other soul powers, to which she replied that she could only approximate. But this was more than enough to bring his ideas for Fang Ning's videos to life, and he was overjoyed at the opportunity to improve his content. His eyes lit up with this idea, and he was prematurely happy about how his video would get to the top and entail a frenzied reaction from the audience. First, he explained to Zhongli how to use the phone and shoot video correctly so that he could talk freely on camera. She quickly grasped all the necessary information and began to follow Fang Ning's instructions, holding the phone in her hands for the first time. But she didn't have to hold it for long, as she had the power of levitation and easily lifted the phone into the air without any interference. Encouraging the girl, Fang Ning said that while she was filming him on her phone, they would look for new goodies for her. Of course, she agreed, because this was the only thing that interested her, and she rejoiced, like a child, at the opportunity to eat deliciously. He was proud of how well he used her abilities, since a flying wife with superpowers was probably the best operator. Fang Ning already imagined how much popularity he would gain, leaving anyone out of competition, basking in the glory. He was mentally over the moon about the perfectly thought-out plan, and what attracted him most was the opportunity to make a lot of money from it. The guy continued to give his instructions to Zhongli so that everything would go perfectly, but for her it only mattered to find goodies, so she agreed to everything. Another of his reservations was that under no circumstances should he turn off the camera or interrupt the shooting, no matter what happens. The long-awaited shooting began, and Fang Ning appeared in the frame, in combat readiness for new discoveries of a place forgotten by everyone. In his usual manner, he greeted the audience and announced the beginning of a new story involving paranormal phenomena, which they had missed so much. He continued to tell where he had taken him this time, describing the eerie atmosphere of the abandoned classrooms. I remembered the recent broadcast from the princess's grave and his successful exposure of her real existence, and that this is not his last trip to forgotten places, because today they are in one of those. The guy briefly told the history of this place from the beginning of its foundation and construction until the disappearance of the girl, which marked the beginning of the strange legend of the village of Haiyuan. Since then, fatal accidents have constantly occurred in this place. Until 3 years ago this school was demolished and residents moved away from this village. Could these mysterious events be a coincidence, and who is behind these terrible murders if it is not the work of ghosts? Fang Ning continued. Today I will try to understand this terrible story and personally check the involvement of ghosts in the disappearances of people, and now I am in the former director's office, where my investigation will begin. The comb lying on the table began to move on its own, emitting a strange, ominous energy from the other world. For Zhongli, this was a sign of the presence of something very tasty, and she immediately felt some kind of active force. She tried not to think about food, because she had the responsibility of filming the video, and not letting her husband down was more important. The girl clenched her teeth, reassuring herself that she could eat in peace after the shooting, and this was not a critical situation, so she could be patient. Fang Ning continued to talk about the director's suicide and the strange woman's wooden comb they found on his desk. He enjoyed being a ghost hunter so much that he did not notice anything surprising around him. But at that second something bothered him, and he listened with bated breath to what was happening behind him. He turned to face the table and couldn't believe his eyes, asking himself what was happening this time. The comb he left on the table began to spin around like a whirlwind, emitting red energy that couldn't mean anything good for him. He thought it was possible that Zhongli would use her soul power to help him with the special effects, but he didn't ask her to do so. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a pale gray hand with long feminine claws appeared and grabbed Fang Ning's hand tightly. Fighting off his worst thoughts, he still hoped that this was the work of Zhongli, but after looking at her, he realized that this was not the case. If it is not his wife who is doing this, then where did this hand come from, and the main question that bothered him was whose it was. Turning around, he lost his tongue at the sight of a female figure with black, empty eyes like an abyss, clutching his hand. He didn't have time to say a word when he felt that the hand of an unknown creature was around his neck, preventing him from breathing. The guy understood that in this position he could not even write, and it seemed that his body had stopped obeying him. It seemed that he was paralyzed, and he thought that these were the natural abilities of this monster, but he did not know what to do now and how to get out of the clutches of the monster if his body did not work. The monster looked at Fong Ning with its dark eyes, as if hypnotizing him with its magical gaze and instilling even greater fear. In his mind, what he wanted most was for Jiang Li to save him, but it seemed like she didn't notice how his life was hanging by a thread. As promised, the girl ignored the presence of this mysterious entity, continuing to film the video as Fong Ning asked her to do. Oxygen was becoming less and less, and Fong Ning could only mentally beg for his salvation and hope that Jiang Li would understand that he needed to be rescued immediately. He felt himself begin to lose consciousness again from lack of oxygen, and his eyes slowly closed as he neared death. At that moment, the bracelet that he constantly wore on his hand shone with a dazzling light, diluting the darkness in his eyes. Suddenly he felt it, which is filled with incredible strength and with anger and confidence, said that he will not die right here and now. The monster did not expect such resistance from an ordinary boy, but this did not stop him, because he was not his first victim and no one had yet managed to defeat him. But Fong Ning was no longer as simple as it seemed to the freak, and, charged with an unknown kind of energy, he grabbed her in response to strike. She didn't understand how he managed to touch her, because she knew that mere mortals couldn't do it, which meant something had gone wrong. He dealt her a powerful magical blow, knocking her down and throwing her to the other end of the office, and this gave rise to an unprecedented rage. While the enemy was overcome for a second, Fong Ning sat down to catch his breath and take in full light air after his recent suffocation. Having come to his senses, he realized that he had hit the monster not with his own strength, but with a strange, unknown power, and he was interested in where it came from. He looked at where the ugly girl was sitting and saw her despair and sadness, and then she asked why he was doing this to her and for what. Fong Ning's blow was so strong that it left cracks on the floor, where an unknown monster sat and begged for mercy. But her words were a trap to awaken humanity in the guy, and taking advantage of his weakness, she attacked him with a new wave of hatred. It was as if some alien voice in his head gave the command to duck and duck from the blow, but this was definitely not his conscious decision. But willy-nilly he deviated and avoided the crushing blow of an ugly ghost in a bloody dress who was trying to kill him. The emotions inside the guy simply went off scale, and he felt incredible strength and flexibility that he had never experienced before. After successfully eliminating the monster's blow, he mocked her, proud of his superiority in deceptive maneuvers. The ghostly killer realized that the forces were unequal and tried to quietly escape from the person who had the ability to touch him and could destroy him. But her attempt was in vain, because at the door she came across a magical barrier that did not allow her to leave the office. The same voice in Fong Ning's head spoke again and said to practice destroying supernatural creatures and finish off this monster first. He realized that what he heard in his head was Jiang Li's voice, and it was she who gave him the power to fight the monster. Now everything fell into place, and Fong Ning was glad that he could fight with paranormal creatures on an equal basis thanks to the power of Jiang Li, and began the real show. He flew up to strike the mystical beast again, but this time she dodged it and remained undamaged. She realized that something was wrong here and his power was too unreal for an ordinary person, so she did not want to risk her life and tried to escape again. But Fong Ning didn't want to let her go so easily, and, due to his desire to make this video even cooler, he caught the ghost by the hand to continue the fight. With all his strength, Fong Ning again threw the monster so that it almost broke through the wall of the office with its body. He pushed her against the wall and pointedly said that after she attacked him, he was able to successfully fight back, so there was no point in running away from him. Realizing that she would not overcome him with physical strength, she decided to take a different path, using tactics more typical for a woman. The first to use were the most seductive feminine charms that can attract anyone, even an indifferent man. Fong Ning was surprised by such changes in her behavior and fell out of reality for a minute, forgetting about what he wanted to do next. Suddenly, from an evil, ugly ghost with dark eyes the color of darkness, a surprisingly sweet and beautiful girl appeared, seemingly not posing any threat. Trying to seduce the guy, the girl approached his face so that his hand was on her waist, and her chest was pressed tightly against his chest. Further reducing the space between them, the girl approached and gently whispered in his ear for him to let her go. She kindly turned to him with an offer to let her go, and she, in turn, would do everything he asked. The girl playfully tickled his ear, smiling at him in the hope that her feminine charms would work and he would let her go. Fang Ning almost fainted from her image and melted at the display of tenderness from such a seemingly terrible creature. His thoughts were interrupted by someone's obsessive whimpering, which puzzled his peace of mind and harmony next to the girl. Jiang Li's voice in his head about his inappropriate behavior with his living wife nearby brought him back to reality. Realizing his mistake, Fang Ning pulled away from the girl with the Crimea about how she could behave so shamefully without being embarrassed by anything. The girl was frightened by his cry and she did not understand why he was so aggressive towards her, although she spoke quite kindly. He commented on his behavior not with the desire for this impudent girl to believe that she could conquer his iron will with such ridiculous methods. Fang Ning was glad that he was able to respond to Jiang Li's remarks in such a timely manner, otherwise reprisal today would have awaited him, not the monster. The ghostly girl's next move was tears as a way of manipulation, and she said that she did not wish the guy harm and did not plan to cause pain. She blew her magic on him so that he was speechless and could only stand indestructibly in front of him. Feeling that she was misleading him, he came to his senses, but a strange feeling of some kind of unfulfillment remained in his body. Trying to grab the ghost's hand again, this time he failed and it flew through him over the smoke. It was just an exhibition game and the ghost got what it wanted in the form of Fang Ning's soul power, showing his true self again. Now her strength doubled, in contrast to the weakened Fang Ning, and she hit him with all her might, without hiding her anger. Fang Ning could not handle such power and flew across the floor across the room, only landing on his feet at the end. The ghost was already celebrating her victory, seething in the dark, magical forces of her nature, which surrounded her on all sides, creating a mystical hurricane. Having taken the power of Fang Ning's soul, the ghost mockingly thanked him for the delicious dinner, which doubled her power. Realizing his superiority over him, the ghost swung contentedly again to strike, realizing that he was unable to fight back. With her sharpened claws, she hit every accessible part of the guy's body, cutting his shoulders and knees until they bled. Her gloomy gaze was directed as if to nowhere, and bloody manchas covered her entire body and face, turning her into a mutilated piece of meat. She couldn't stop until she completed the job and the guy was ashes, so she screamed with a new surge of hatred, directing a wave of magical, destructive power in his direction. Her disfigured face rejoiced that she was stronger and could easily destroy her opponent, and her eyes resembled two endless black abysses. She didn't stop, delivering blow after blow to the already pretty beaten guy, getting incredible pleasure from it. However, the next blow was less useful and she stared in surprise, no longer expecting any resistance from the almost overcome enemy. But new forces arrived at Fang Ning with the help of Jiang Li and he was able to eliminate the last blow of the ghost, saying that now it was his turn to attack. This turn of events did not suit the monster at all and it was not going to give up, preparing for a new clash of their forces. But Fang Ning's blow came by surprise and he mocked her, agitating her to kill him as she wanted, because this is the only thing she knows how to do. The freak was shocked that the guy decided to hit him so roughly and hard in the face, and with even darker eyes he barked that he shouldn't have done it. But Fang Ning was determined and pointing to his numerous wounds from her claws, said that this blow was only the slightest part of what she deserved. Without hesitation, he decided to deal with the monster once and for all, hitting her head on the table, saying that his mission was to overcome monsters like her and establish justice. All this terrible action was recorded on the camera of Fang Ning's phone, which Jiang Li did not let go of, as the guy asked. Jiang Li successfully fulfilled her part and tried better to remove the reprisal against the otherworldly entity, being proud of her husband. No longer able to withstand the oncoming hunger, Jiang Li began to suck out the soul power of the powerful entity that Fang Ning was fighting with. She waited for this moment for a very long time and, having feasted on the tasty power, rejoiced at the pleasant feeling of satiety. After losing her strength, the ugly woman no longer posed any threat and Fang Ning began to ask who she was and why she was harming innocent people. With a pitiful expression on her face, the ghost looked at the guy as if it wasn't she who wanted to kill him a minute ago and she didn't understand what they were talking about. Fang Ning swung his hand, to knock the truth out of the evil creature, who again tried to gain his trust, but at that moment she burst into tears and the guy was embarrassed, as if he had organized this massacre and was mocking an innocent girl. She fell to her knees and sobbed, asking why he was treating her so badly and why he wanted to hit her. When Jiangli took away the soul powers from the freak, she began to change her account in front of Fang Ning, which shocked him. Instead of an evil otherworldly entity, the same girl Lian Xiang who disappeared 10 years ago appeared in front of him, who sincerely cried, asking how he knew her name. Fang Ning couldn't believe his eyes that he was actually seeing this girl alive, but she didn't know who she was talking to, so she politely asked who her interlocutor was. The guy knew that if he found out more information about long-standing events in this school, his video would definitely become popular, so he immediately moved on to questions about how the girl died and why she attacked him. Without waiting for an answer, he again asked if there were any other ghosts in this school besides her, but it was clear from her that she was very puzzled and did not know what to say. With tears in her eyes, the girl screamed that she was being forced to do this and that she did not want to harm anyone, and Fang Ning asked who exactly was doing this to her and whether he was involved in her own death. The guy remembered himself at her age and how he was forced to endure daily torture from his guardians, unable to resist fate. These thoughts stirred up long-forgotten anger at those who have no right to abuse defenseless children like him and Lian Xiang and should be held accountable for it. Fang Ning hugged the frightened girl and assured her that he would help her if she told her who forced her to kill and killed her. The girl had long despaired of her salvation, so she hesitantly asked the guy if he would really help her and received an approving answer. Having calmed down a little, the girl decides to tell her saviors about everything, in the hope that her suffering will finally end. However, their conversation was interrupted by a strange magical phenomenon, which lifted the girl from the floor with the wind, tearing her away from Fang Ning. She was being pulled into an unknown, dark, warm region, and most of all Fang Ning wanted to save her from there and reached out with his hand to grab her. The girl screamed in horror and did not want to return to the 10-year darkness again and stretched out her hands to Fang Ning as the last thread of her life. The darkness greedily consumed her without leaving the slightest chance and she lost hope of salvation, but continued to hope that Fang Ning would save her. But it was already too late, and before Fang Ning's eyes, the girl disappeared into the dark, otherworldly force that came for her. Fang Ning had never seen such an amazing monster before and was scared by what happened to this girl. The monster showed his devilish accounting with red hellish eyes and was clearly not happy that someone had encroached on what belonged to him. Without a moment's hesitation, he wished the guy only a painful death for the insolence shown towards his person and his things. Fang Ning understood that it would not be easy for him to deal with a monster like this, but he did not want to retreat and was ready to fight for Lian Xiang's life. At this moment, his submissive wife came to Fang Ning's defense, who could not stand aside when he was in danger. Using the power of her magic, Jiangli created a powerful shock wave and dealt a crushing blow to the monster. However, this wave also touched Fang Ning himself, who flew away and hit the wall, screaming from the pain in his back that almost broke the wall in half. The guy was unable to even move from his injuries and, falling to the ground, slowly lost consciousness. Jiangli sensed that something was wrong and took a break from confronting the monster to make sure her husband was okay, because that was the most important thing. This was her fatal mistake, because the monster took advantage of her weakness and was able to neutralize her defense and attack in response. And his insidious power struck Jiangli on the spot, leaving no chance for an equal battle, and the girl lost the opportunity to protect herself and her beloved. Due to the strength and excruciating pain, Fang Ning opened his eyes, worried about Jiangli, checking that she was okay, although he could no longer help. And the last thing he saw was Jiangli begging to save her face, who found herself in the clutches of a terrible, furious monster. The next time he opened his eyes, he saw in front of him a safe and sound wife, who was patiently waiting for him to awaken. When he woke up, he realized that he was lying in her arms, but his head was dizzy, and his body ached down to every bone. Jiang Li's joy knew no bounds, and she sincerely looked into her beloved's eyes and was glad that he was alive and could finally come to his senses. But he couldn't understand where exactly he was, and there were too many questions in his head that he didn't have any answers to yet. He jumped out of Jiang Li's arms, but did not know that they were sitting on a high tree and, having lost support under their feet, flew down. He felt that he was flying, or rather falling, and that the ground was approaching him with incredible speed, and he was overcome by incredible fear. He hovered a few centimeters from the ground, no longer hoping for a good landing, but his wife decided otherwise. Under the influence of her power, he, just like her, fluttered in the air like a feather and, looking around, asked how they ended up outside the school. He was glad that they managed to get out of there, but he was haunted by thoughts about the girl whom they could not save from the clutches of the monster. For Jiangli, it was only delicious food and enough, but the guy was interested in how strong that monster was and whether Jiangli could defeat him. The girl thoughtfully replied that she now had too little strength in her soul to fight such a powerful monster, and it was impossible for her. She decided to change the subject and handed Fang Ning his phone with a recorded video of everything that happened at Haiyuan school. At this time, the girl again thought that she needed to eat something tasty, and her eyes lit up with anticipation of the meal. Fang Ning, of course, was surprised by what she called delicious, because it was a black, disgusting, gigantic finger of unknown origin. Jiangli denied his disgust and said that it was very tasty, and she took it when she took him out of school. Fang Ning still didn't understand how she could eat it and suggested at least frying the severed finger to give it a more appetizing look. But the girl did not agree with him and showed how she feeds on the magical power of the soul of this finger, sucking it down to the last drop. He watched as with incredible appetite the girl absorbed incomprehensible black energy from the otherworldly flesh of the monster. After her short meal, the girl only smacked her lips with a pleasant feeling of satiety and sweetly licked her lips. Looking at Fang Ning with a smile and love, she sent a beam of dazzling rainbow-colored energy towards him. This ray struck Fang Ning's soul, and his previous fatigue from the eventful night seemed to simply dissolve inside without a trace. He noticed that Jiangli had become much stronger and began to reflect on the fact that the power of the souls of other objects gave strength to her own soul. After his thoughts, he asked what happened after he lost consciousness and how she managed to get him out of there. In addition, it bothered him that at one moment he felt stronger and more energetic than ever. She began to tell how they actually managed to escape, but was stopped by a strange burning sensation that ran down her back. The first rays of the rising sun had a strange effect on her, and from the effect of heat on her body, it began to smoke as if it were burning. She interrupted her story and asked Fang Ning to return home first and then continue the story. Without waiting for consent, she grabbed him by the arms and they rose high above the city, flying into the dawn sky to Fang Ning's apartment. Against the background of dormant buildings, a green light flashed from the flight of our heroes and they successfully reached the apartment window. Upon arrival, Jiangli hid in a corner where the sun's rays had not yet reached and sat like a kitten while the smoke dissipated from her clothes. Fang Ning thought that this reaction was caused by the fact that the girl was not yet accustomed to the sun, having been in the darkness of the night for thousands of years. Closing the curtains on the window, the room became dark, and the guy had to turn on the light in order to at least see Jiangli a little. He sat down on the bed to rest after the flight, which he handled much better this time than the previous one. Feeling that the threat from the sun had passed, Jiangli attacked Fang Ning with sincere hugs and words of love, but he did not count on this. This gesture even angered him, because they did not finish, and he pulled her away from him and asked her to sit on the bed next to him. Jiangli felt like a trained kitten who needed to be taught everything so that she could protect the guy when he needed it. But at that moment he gently stroked her cheek and she melted under his touch, forgetting about what she had thought the day before. He warned her that these curtains would not be able to block out the sun's rays once the sun was fully up, so she would need to hide somewhere. She poked him in the chest and said that this problem could be solved if she entered his body, then the sun would not bother her. As an argument, she said that he had already made an agreement with her and in her husband's body she would definitely not die, so she could not resist him. Fang Ning could not have expected this, and he had no idea what kind of agreement she was talking about, because he knew that he had not concluded anything with her. In a calm tone, he asked what kind of agreement we were talking about, and the girl replied that he himself said that he wanted to marry her, so everything was fair. He began to remember moments from the same night when he confessed to her, not knowing that in front of him was not a hired actress, and everything began to fall into place. Jiangli added that after his confession, an agreement was formed which she just remembered to him and now he must abide by it. She clarified that, according to the agreement, they now have a common body for two, and as long as Fang Ning finds her delicious food, she will be able to restore her strength. He did not understand what it meant to share one body into two, and Zhongli explained that he should find her goodies and then she would live, and if not, then he would die with her. She once again noted that if he dies, then she will die and they need to stick together and look for a source of energy for her. She also added that being so dependent on him would now constantly protect him from danger as a bonus to the use of his body. Now some things began to become clearer in the guy's head, and he understood the reason for his excessive fatigue. He was interested in the incredible power that appeared in him at school during the battle with the ghost, also the work of Zhongli. Zhongli replied that it was she who endowed him with supernatural power and now they could share her own power between them. Exclaiming joyfully, she added that if she received enough food, her husband could be strong and powerful. Fang Ning could not believe that he had set such a trap for himself with his own hands and was now dependent on this girl, the reason for his mistake. At this time, events were unfolding at Haiyuan school that did not remain without a trace after the visit of our heroes. Defenseless Lian Xiang suffered from brutal bullying and beatings, allegedly for her disobedience and tyranny, and was unable to escape from this hell. The whole body ached from numerous bruises and wounds, but this did not stop the monster and cruelly continued his educational work on his slave. He gave her the opportunity to kill people, but she still doesn't listen to him, and the incident with the uninvited guests could expose his identity, which cannot be allowed. With uncontrollable rage, he grabbed the girl by the throat in order to better convey his words to her and show his boundless and complete power over her. He threatened that they need to be the first to attack those daring ones in order to avoid a second strike, and now this is their goal. Lian Xiang almost didn't hear his words because she couldn't breathe from the strong pressure of his hand, so she was in an uncontrollable state and it was hard to focus on anything. Next, the black figure hugged the girl to herself and said that she was only him and could not leave him alone. The girl realized with horror that she was forever chained to this terrible monster and had no right to freedom, so she simply remained silent to his words. He raised his hand, which was missing one phalanx, and said that he knew about their return and this time he would destroy them with his own hands. Morning came and Fang Ning, as usual, went to his favorite place to have breakfast and was already waiting for his order. The waiter knew him very well, so they talked like friends, and he asked the reason for such an early visit, because Fang Ning usually comes before closing, but the guy couldn't tell him this. Fang Ning's order was already on the table and the waiter duplicated all his wishes to make sure that he had not forgotten anything and that the client was satisfied. Fang Ning thanked sincerely, although it was too eloquent, and proceeded to eat a delicious hot, spicy breakfast in the form of noodles with beef and green onions. Fang Ning turned to Zhongli, who was in his body, and reminded him that she had also lost the powers of her soul and wanted to talk about it. The girl agreed with him and said that the strength of her soul could only be restored by absorbing the strength of another soul and she needed to find it. While enjoying his breakfast, Fang Ning did not hear what she said and asked again what exactly needed to restore her strength. In her usual manner, she said that she needed to eat something tasty, or she could absorb the fear of other people and it would restore her strength. Fang Ning was surprised by this information, and the girl explained that when she met him for the first time, she received a full charge of energy, and before that she felt like she was in a semi-conscious state. The guy remembered many stories where spirits frightened their victims and fed on their fears, and this is probably normal for them, considering that paranormal phenomena are always frightening. Fang Ning realized that the fear of thousands of people during the broadcast from the cemetery helped Zhongli regain his soul powers. He finished his noodles, leaving the plate empty of any crumbs, and loudly set it down on the table with a sound of full satisfaction. As he walked, he turned to his friend Uncle Zhang and said that he would pay at the end of the month, to which his uncle replied that it would be better to come to his shop and help as much as possible. Fang Ning raised his hand and showed an approving gesture that he would definitely comply with his request for help. He returned home and sat down to work editing the night's video, remembering some points that were worth thinking about. While watching the recording, the guy thought that just like holding a phone in his hands for the first time, Zhongli perfectly handled all aspects of creating a high-quality video. He reasoned that by processing the video, it could become another hit and scare thousands of viewers, which would help Zhongli regain his strength and his idea would satisfy the needs of both parties. Fang Ning remembered the director's team with whom he filmed the broadcast from the cemetery and noted their professionalism and affordable pricing policy and plans to continue cooperation in the future. Having completed his thoughts, Fong Ning called out Jiang Li's name, who was sitting above the bed and clicking on his phone. With lightning speed, she crossed the distance between them and found herself opposite the face of Fong Ning, who frightened him a little. She was indignant that her beloved calls her by name, and at these moments she feels alien and distant from him. He thought and began to scroll through the possible options in his head that he could not address, and the first thought was the word crumb. Jiang Li liked this name much more, and she smiled sweetly at Fong Ning as a sign that it was much better and more pleasant for her. After thinking again, he decided that he would call her Little Li and moved on to a serious conversation about yesterday's monster at school, but she interrupted him. Hearing about this monster, Li remembered that he was only a tasty meal for her, but Fong Ning continued, or she doesn't know how to get rid of him. He thought that yesterday's video was incomplete and he needed to go back and film a whole series of investigations into the mystery of the Haiyuan school, which would become an even bigger hit than the video from the princess's tomb. Moreover, he promised Lien Xiang to save her from the monster and figure out what really happened at Haiyuan Elementary School. Little Li replied that now she does not have enough strength to return to school with the monster in her gag, which she cannot find, can help her. Fong Ning was ready to do anything to continue the investigation, so he agreed to find the hairpin, but Li remembered that it was stolen from her 6 months ago and she periodically appeared at the tomb before coming to her senses. She asked with all her heart to help her return to the tomb, because that hairpin was very important to her. Fong Ning replied that they were now one, and if it was very important for her, then they would certainly find the hairpin, but he wanted to clarify whether Li could defeat yesterday's bridge with this hairpin. Li nodded approvingly and said that with this hairpin she could eat that delicious monster in Haiyuan and their search would be worth it. And then Fong Ning encountered difficulties, because he didn't know where to start the search and he didn't know who stole this hairpin and where to look for them, but Li said that she sadly remembered 3 people near the tomb. Little Li recalled that 2 of them were so frightened of her that they lost consciousness, and the 3rd disappeared, so he kept the hairpin most of all. Fong Ning was upset because in 6 months this man could have left the city, but Li denied this and said that after regaining her strength she could roughly determine the location of this man and he was definitely in the city now. This was their only clue and they decided to go in search, and after they found the hairpin, they would return to school and continue filming about the mysterious monster Haiyuan. Li agreed with him and said that they would definitely return to school to eat deliciously with the powers of the souls of those monsters. Fong Ning got down to business and began looking for information about the tomb robbers while there was still time for this and it was not too late. When he reached for the phone, some strange message came, but today he did not expect an SMS from anyone, so he was surprised. His first thought was that this director Wang had written about finishing the video editing, but only a few hours had passed and it was not being done that quickly. It was a warning to the population about a dangerous situation in the city, caused by mass injuries of residents, but Fong Ning was alerted by the fact that the police were warning about the threat en masse, which meant that there was something really serious there. Meanwhile, in Director Wang's office, the work process was raging and all the workers were immersed in editing orders. However, this was not entirely true and the company was experiencing a real crisis, being on the verge of bankruptcy. One of the workers, bored, said that if this continues, they will simply die of hunger. Another worker echoed his opinion and added that if it weren't for the order from Mr. Fong Ning 2 days ago, they would have been without work at all. The third worker screamed at them not to mention the terrible night near the tomb where they almost died, and his hair still stands on end just thinking about it. The workers then began to discuss the idea of quitting at the end of this month, because there was little prospect for such work, and although Director Wang treated them well, it would not save their financial situation. One of the workers added that at this rate it would be impossible for him to pay rent this month, and at that moment Director Wang burst into the office. He was surprisingly joyful and cheerful, as if he had won the lottery, and addressed his team with good news in an encouraging tone. Seeing the director, everyone pretended that they were working on something, so as not to receive a portion of abuse for sitting idle. No one wanted to prematurely respond to the director's causeless joy, and one of the workers decided to ask what kind of work awaited them this time. The director came to the table and happily announced that he had posted the resume to the working group and they had received an order from Mr. Fong Ning again. This information shocked everyone, and from the very name of the customer they felt uneasy, and the chief cameraman asked if the director really wanted to go to some cemetery again to film a live broadcast. He added that one's own life is more important than work, so he advised not to agree to Mr. Fong Ning's proposal, but the director reassured them, saying that they only needed to edit the video. His eyes sparkled at the profit from this montage, and as a bonus, he added that if the video became popular, it would add even more privileges. The editor got to work and said from the first frame that if in this video Fong Ning does not fight the ghost again, then it will not bring him any success. His colleagues supported his opinion and said that the fact that this guy did not die during filming in the cemetery was their merit, and he was offering too little a price for editing the new video. Director Wang was angry at their impudence and shouted that this video would definitely become popular and let them watch it first and then talk. He eagerly turned on the video and thought that this time his company would definitely be able to restore its reputation, and this video would shock all viewers. Everyone sat down carefully to watch the recording, and at first it was not yet clear where this story was going and it did not evoke any stories. But after just a few seconds, their opinion changed and they watched in horror. Already in the first frames, they noticed a comb behind Fong Ning's back, which began to move on its own, as if enchanted. One of his colleagues was so shocked that he uncontrollably grabbed a friend sitting next to him by the throat and strangled him with shaking hands in a fit of fear. When he woke up, he cordially apologized for his actions, but his colleague asked him what exactly scared him so much about a simply moving scallop. But then a black-haired monster appeared in the frame, from which Fong Ning was fighting, and then the camera team's eyes nearly popped out of their heads. One of the employees even lost consciousness from the nightmare he saw and the video that was made so realistically. He asked how it could be done and whether it was really some kind of computer graphics or a specially designed mechanism in the table, because he could not explain it otherwise. The director refuted his guesses and said that the ugly one disappears and appears in other places, and in his 10 years of experience creating videos, he did not notice any editing here. Then the girl Yen Xiang appeared in the video, although just like with the freak, it was not clear where exactly, and behind her was a terrible monster and Jiang Li, who was fighting with him. Having watched to the end, everyone present was shocked, and the director said that even though he had seen this video several times already, it still made his hair stand on end. There was a buzz of questions in the studio and everyone was interested in continuing the story of how Yen Xiang actually died and whether this video really concerns the story that happened 10 years ago. The director prepared for such questions, and before that he went to the city library in search of information and found a newspaper in which the photo of the girl was similar to the one in the video. He encouraged his workers that if the video was edited well, it would get a lot of views, and Fong Ning promised a percentage of the total profits, so the director would pay bonuses if everything worked out. These words were like honey to the ears of the workers, who had not seen a bonus or a normal salary for a long time, so they agreed to cooperate. Charged with positivity and an opinion about the award from the director, they all began to edit the video with ghosts. 4 hours later the video was ready, and in the first frame there was a girl and a title about a suicide and the real story of 10 years ago. They improved the quality and added background music, and the video became even creepier than it was, and the director rejoiced at the impeccable work of his workers. When asked if anything else needed to be improved, the director replied that no, and they could simply send the video to him by email and he would upload it from his account. The operator warned him not to do this directly, and it was better to send the video to Mr. Fong Ning first to make sure everything was fine. Director Wang said that this is not necessary, and they can easily upload videos, because Mr. Fong Ning completely trusts their professionalism, and he already has a lot of things to do. Before a video is uploaded to the internet, it must undergo additional testing at another video studio to control the content. And so at the headquarters of the video studio, another ordinary working day passed without any interesting events, and everyone went about their usual business. An employee of the video selection department sat, as usual, bored in front of his computer, waiting for the end of the working day. Suddenly he receives a video with a screaming title about a real story from 10 years ago, and he thinks that this is just another adventure thriller and nothing special. There have been a lot of these videos lately and they are mainly to increase popularity, and this video was no exception, although the cover was amazing. But after watching the video, he radically changed his mind and was surprised by the unfolding events. A vile, ugly monster with huge Gostera fangs and eyes burning with hellish fire appeared in the frame, which looked straight through the soul. It was so unexpected and frightening that the video sorter doused himself with boiling water while trying to make tea. The entire office of workers turned around to hear his insane cry from the guardianship, and no one could understand why he was so scared. The sorter returned to watching the video with comments that it was very exciting and he had never seen anything like it before. He called all his colleagues and encouraged them to watch this very emotional and fascinating video with him, because it is simply a masterpiece. Everyone was surprised by this reaction, because lately there has been nothing but nonsense on the internet, but the sorter objected that this video was worth their attention. They still doubted that something really interesting had happened to him, but without wasting time, the sorter simply played a video for his colleagues so that they could understand everything themselves. Colleagues watched with rapture the events in the video, and from their reaction it was clear that the plot was simply fantastic. They agreed that the video was very cool and everyone wanted to see the continuation of the mysterious story of Hyun. They noticed that by filming it all on a phone, the special effects were no worse than those of cinema and everything looked surprisingly real and even too ideal. Looking at the author of this video, they wondered who he was and how he was able to create such perfect content. At this time, our hero woke up and, with renewed vigor, planned to go in search of Jiang Li's lost hairpin. Walking down the street and mentally talking to Little Li in his body, he said that he had researched all the news about the village with the princess's tomb, and it turned out that someone had witnessed 3 strangers looking for something near this village. After this, the police began to receive complaints and the police arrived at the scene, but were able to catch only 2 robbers, and the third disappeared without a trace. The 2 who were detained claimed that they saw something incredibly terrible in that place, but the police took it as a state of passion and the criminals were placed in a detention center for stealing relics. However, no traces of excavations were found at the crime scene, and both robbers, who could tell something, simply went crazy and nothing could be established. Fong Ning thought that if the robbers were able to steal the hairpin from the princess, then they are not as simple as they seem, and it remains a mystery whether the third of them managed to return and cover their tracks in time. He said that there was probably someone higher behind those people, and perhaps this could be connected with the Hyun school. The guy stopped and asked again if Jiang Li was sure that the robber was somewhere in the city, so that their search would not be in vain. Jiang Li looked out from Fong Ning's body and confirmed that they were already close, and she felt that they would soon find the robber. Fong Ning shouted at Little Li that he couldn't just look out of it, because people were walking along the streets and if they saw her, he wouldn't be able to explain anything. Having satisfied his aggression, he told Jiang Li in a calm tone that he would definitely let her out when they found some deserted place. Fong Ning noticed that it was not even dark on the street yet, and there were fewer and fewer people, and he remembered the police warning that it was better for people not to go out in the dark without an escort. They were the only passers-by in this city, and Fong Ning turned to Little Li to find out where they were going. Jiang Li pushed a smaller version of her hand through Fong Ning's palm and pointed him in the amazing direction he needed. He turned his head to where Jiang Li's hand was pointing and asked exactly what it was here, and she was not mistaken. By all indications, this was the scene of another crime that the police had warned about, and Fong Ning headed there, because according to Jiang Li's version, the robber was there. Behind the yellow tape, many people gathered, who were interested in what happened to the victim and, opening their mouths, watched the terrible picture of the murder. The police were collecting any clues from the crime scene, and one of them was an uncorked bottle of wine next to the victim. The victim's hand was stripped of meat, as if someone had tried to eat him alive, and one phalange was missing. His whole body was dried out, as if someone had sucked all the juices out of him, leaving only skin and bones, and criminologists sadly confirmed that this was just a terrible death and an amazing case. People watching this noticed that this matter was definitely not an easy one if Officer Kan himself came to it. Slowly sipping his cigarette, he asked his colleague what he thought about this murder and who could be behind it. He said that the body looks like a mummy and it is very scary to even imagine the torment this person went through. Fong Ning listened to what was being said in the crowd, and it turned out that this was the 4th such murder, and in general the security of the city had been shaken, and the incident that happened a month ago was no better. He made his way among the people to see with his own eyes the corpse of that man and make sure that everything was really as bad as they say. Captain Jan's colleague turned around to answer his questions about this killer, but he looked too confused. He simply listed the facts that the death occurred at approximately 1 in the morning. There were no signs of an attack and no traces of the killer were found at the crime scene, and the killer knew exactly the location of the cameras and the suspects could not be found. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be heart failure, as in the other victims, but the most surprising thing was that some of the victims did not have any heart disease during their lives. After listening to a list of facts from his assistant, Captain Jan asked to say something specific about this case, and he replied that this was more than just an accident, but serial murders. He also added that the killer definitely avoided the cameras, because no traces of contact with the victim were found. Captain Zan noted that there were also no signs of poisoning, and all this was akin to natural death, but outwardly the body looked like a mummy, and the theory of natural death disappeared, and it was necessary to look for other options. The subordinate was in a complete stupor, because he could not explain it any other way, unless the killer was a ghost who did not leave any traces behind. He whispered to the captain his assumption, but he was not surprised and asked to exclude all possible options, but no other explanation had yet been forthcoming. As a safety measure, the captain asked higher authorities to issue a warning to avoid night travel, and that was the end of his options to resolve the matter. Finishing his cigarette, he turned to his charge and said that it was time for them to go and that this world was not as simple as he thought. Another night has come, which brings with it the secrets of mysterious murders, and against the background of the night sky stood an abandoned, dilapidated building. An unfamiliar guy knelt down against the wall in the middle of an empty corridor and lit a red candle, which created at least some kind of lighting. He resignedly extended his palms, in which lay a beautiful woman's hairpin, and said that the time had come for his master. After these words, the candle that the guy lit instantly went out, although there was not even a hint of wind. And then a huge disgusting face with a lot of eyes and a sleepy look appeared in front of the guy, who had bowed his head obediently. Hearing the guy's words, the monster laughed and greedily licked his lips and said that it was time for a new hunt. The guy meekly replied that it was already night and they could go hunting at any moment. Such devotion and humility greatly impressed the monster, and he mockingly praised the guy for his flattering words. Suddenly the giant Makitra disappeared and a small ugly creature appeared on the guy's back, who told him that he did not regret that he had chosen him among the three. He added with a smile that with his help the police would never be able to find them and their crimes would never be exposed. Then the monster picked up the hairpin that the guy had brought and said that this king now has an invincible Horcrux in his hands. Continuing in the same vein, the ugly woman noticed that a soul of the 4th level could easily cope with this, not to mention fragile people, and by the time the soul hunters came, they would have time to hide. As a conclusion to everything that had been said, the monster added that this was their last night in this place, and then there would be a new story. With an angry and smug tone, the monster told the guy that it was time for them to go out on their last hunt. The city was swallowed up by a dark night and the deserted streets were illuminated only by neon signs of various establishments and eateries. In one of these places, Fang Ning sat with little Li inside without any success during the day in searching for the lost item. He asked Jiang Li if she could feel where the hairpin was now, but she answered with disappointment that her aura had become somewhat blurry. Fang Ning wanted to clarify why she led him to that corpse on the street, and it turned out that he smelled of her high heel and he probably had it before his death. Suddenly, little Li looked out from Fang Ning's shoulder and said that she felt her hairpin and they needed to hurry to find it. Fang Ning looked out the window, but there were quite a lot of people there and he didn't know who exactly might have this hairpin, but Jiang Li felt that they were somewhere close. The guy got up and rushed headlong to the exit, shouting to the waiter that he didn't need to pay the rest for drinks because he was in a hurry. The waiter with sad eyes looked at Fang Ning's glass, under which lay a loan bill, and repeated the words that the guy said. But his sadness gave way to aggression, because Fang Ning constantly came there, sat for hours, was silent and drank boiled water and left only $1, like the most miser. While making his way through the crowd of drunk people who were having a party in full swing, Fang Ning found himself in a stampede several times. Jiang Li couldn't sense the location of her hairpin due to her lack of concentration in the large crowd. Fang Ning decided to check everyone present in the club, and being nearby, she would definitely feel who exactly had her hairpin. An unfamiliar girl approached Fang Ning and offered to treat such a handsome guy to a drink and talk. She gently touched his cheek and said that they should have a drink and go from here to a quieter place to discuss life, which made Fang Ning feel embarrassed. He politely said that he had other things to do, but she took this to mean that he was afraid of her and only virgins behave this way. To make the guy think a little faster, Jiangli decided to help and pinched Fang Ning's side with all her might. It must have been too painful, because the guy screamed and without thinking pushed the prostitute away from him. The crowd fell silent, wondering what had happened and who had argued with whom, while the girl sat on the floor and moaned from the strong impact of her fall. A hostile gang gathered around Fang Ning and threatened him with violence for causing such a mess in their place. Fang Ning began to make excuses that this was all a mistake and warned not to try to harm him, because he would not be able to resist. Fang Ning's threat did not affect the owner of the establishment in any way, because at his age he was no longer afraid of death and ordered his subordinates to take the guest for an individual conversation. One of the owner's subordinates put his hand on the guy's shoulder and told him to follow them kindly, otherwise they would force him. Fang Ning did not like this development of events and he grabbed the bodyguard's hand from his shoulder and squeezed it so hard that he screamed to let him go. Fang Ning knocked him to the ground like a speck of dust and twisted his arm behind his back as he watched everyone stare at him. The owner of the club gave a victorious applause and said with a smile that it was not bad, but there was one problem. He objected that this is not the place where you can behave this way, and a line of irritated bulls was already lined up behind the guy. Jiang Li's voice told the guy that these people irritate her terribly and why shouldn't he deal with them, but Fang Ning jokingly replied that he didn't want to create unnecessary problems and end up in prison. But everything had already been decided without him, and the club's security was in the mood for lynching, swinging bats at Fang Ning. Meanwhile, a drunk man came out of the same club with a bottle in his hands and returned home through the dark streets, muttering something under his breath. He was stopped halfway, but the man was so drunk that he did not suspect any danger, despite the police warning about night walks. From the outside it looked like help from a stranger, and the man leaned on the stranger's shoulder to recover a little and continue on his way. The stranger went with him, supporting him from the side, and the man suggested that they somehow sit at his house and have fun, because he seemed very friendly to him. But this was not destined to come true, because the stranger showed his malicious face, which was controlled by a many-eyed monster. He gave him the same woman's hairpin, but the man could not understand why and what was happening in general. The magical power of the hairpin hypnotized the man, and the stranger whispered to him that by walking along this alley he would get his home. The man resignedly walked along the given route like a zombie, repeating home, and the stranger with a smile told his master that dinner was served. The hypnotized man could not cope with these mystical forces and was simply waiting for a meeting with the bloodthirsty night monster. In 1 second, the hypnosis seemed to disappear and the man could not understand where he was and why he was repeating the same phrase. He stood facing close to the wall, although he clearly remembered that he was walking along a wide street to his house, and now he found himself in a closed corner. He touched the wall with his hands, as if it were not real, and at that moment his hand was grabbed by a black otherworldly creature. The monster constrained the husband's movements, grabbing his legs and arms so that he would not be able to resist him and escape from his appointed death. The man did not know what was happening and just wanted to return home to his son, but the monster decided otherwise, because today is an equally important day for the man, namely the day of his death. After these words, the monster began its meal, greedily absorbing the strength of the soul of the innocent man. A dark corner of the city glowed with a red light that sucked the soul out of a man under the leadership of an evil dwarf monster. He enjoyed watching the last strength leave the human body in the loss of spiritual energy with pain, agony and screams. Devouring the man's soul, the monster thoughtfully said that after such a dinner the king could break through and become a 4th-level soul. The man no longer heard anything and was in a wild whirlpool of unbearable pain and fear, and the last drops of life came out of his body. The last thing he thought was whether this was really the end and death had come for him, although most of all he was not ready for this, and a tear appeared in his eyes, remembering his son. However, at the last moment, Fang Ning appeared and attacked the bridge in flight, saving the man from such a terrible death. The blow was strong enough and the small disgusting monster lost its balance without completing its ritual of eating the soul. Fang Ning stood unwaveringly and watched the monster's lightning fall, proud of his strength, which was able to save people. The injured man, fortunately, remained alive, but his offender still faced serious reprisals from the monster hunter. Taking a slight break from the matter, Fang Ning turned to the man to ask how he was feeling and if everything was okay with him. The man was too exhausted to utter a word, and his body was covered with many wounds and abrasions, so he sat and caught his breath after almost dying. Having overcome himself, the man said one word of gratitude to Fan Ninulisha and fell to the ground, losing consciousness from loss of strength. Fong Ning once again asked the girl if the hairpin was really there, and this time, she answered with precision that this monster had the hairpin. A terrible hurricane of black and red light formed by the monster swirled in the air and a voice thundered towards Fong Ning asking who he was. But this was a rhetorical question, because the monster knew that the soul hunters would come for him, but he did not expect that he declared so quickly and without losing hope whether they knew who they dared to anger. The monster added that he would forgive Fong Ning for his mistake if he left and did not interfere with finishing his dinner, but the guy did not like this idea and he made it clear that he would not leave his actions unpunished and would not retreat. This was a real challenge and the monster said that the guy himself was about to become another of his snacks and did not intend to live to old age if he tried so hard to stop him. Fong Ning was surrounded by the magic of the monster and he felt disgusted by how disgusting it all looked and did not fully understand what would happen to him next. The monster explained that Fong Ning would die from his soul technique and this was a consequence of his thoughtlessness in attacking someone he shouldn't have attacked. However, the monster did not know that Fong Ning was not alone and his wife Jiangli came to his aid, extending her hand through the guy's body. The girl broke the magic ring around Fong Ning and he freed himself from the monster's clutches and sat down on the ground to regain his breath. The monster did not expect this and fearfully asked how he managed to break his soul technique, because it is very difficult even for experienced hunters. Hiding his aces up his sleeve, Fong Ning jokingly replied that he defeated his magic because he was much cuter than the monster. After joking, he got down to business and was ready to strike back at the monster, gathering all of his Jiangli power into one. But the monster was not ready for a fight with such a strong opponent and began to run away, without waiting for Fong Ning to strike, but threatened that he would return. Fong Ning landed and watched with disapproval as the monster kicked his heels, considering him the last coward on earth. However, the bridge could not avoid reprisals so easily, because Jiangli took matters into her own hands and caught up with the monster, sucking the power of the soul from him. From a combat hunter of souls, Jiangli became again like a contented child who was deliciously fed and enjoyed her magical dinner. The monster was gripped by fear, because all the soul powers that he had collected for 6 months were taken away in a second and his spiritual skills were also powerless, so he decided to try to hide before he was completely destroyed. Fiercely, Fong Ning prepared to go into battle again and shouted for the monster to return it to them, that was stolen from Jiangli, otherwise it will be worse. His blow was accompanied by a dazzling solar train and instilled fear in the already frightened monster, which was not going to give in to him. All the guy's indulgences were over and he decisively shouted that they would take what they needed without the consent of the monster himself. With his blow, Fong Ning crushed the monster into the ground, causing him to wince in pain and disappointment of his defeat. The ugly, many-eyed dwarf still wanted to resist, but Fong Ning did not leave him such mercy and pressed him harder to the ground with his foot. He turned to Lyre with a question about their further actions and she said that now she needs to absorb this monster. While Fong Ning held the dwarf with his foot, Lyre straightened out of the guy's body and dragged him towards the monster, taking away the strength of his soul. But even then the dwarf did not want to give up and hoped that he could cope with these hunters in a slightly different way than on his own. Taking out a powerful magical hairpin, he directed its power at the hunters and with abuse wished them to go to hell, showing that it was not all over. The power of the hairpin detached Lyre from Fong Ning's body and a powerful blow passed between them with almost no harm to our heroes. Taking advantage of the moment of surprise, the monster began to disappear before the eyes of the hunters while they regained consciousness after such a maneuver. Behind them, they heard the voice of a policeman, who ordered them to raise their hands up and not move, but Lyre managed to hide in Fong Ning's body and went unnoticed. The policeman appeared so suddenly that Fong Ning did not immediately understand what was happening until he felt his hands being ringed. He heard that they were addressing him again and no longer in a good tone, so that he raised his hands and did not move, as if he had not heard the first time. The policeman shined a flashlight in Fong Ning's face and turned to the captain standing next to him, saying that he had caught the criminal. The captain, without hesitation, pointed the gun at the guy and was ready to shoot for all the terrible things that happened in the city, as if it were his fault. But looking at the guy again, he realized that they were mistaken and this was not the one they were looking for, so he ordered the policeman to let him go. He stared at the captain, as if he had gone crazy letting go of someone they had caught red-handed and all his efforts would be in vain. In his defense, he said that the man's body had the same marks as other victims, and if this guy is not a criminal, then who is? Fong Ning made excuses that he was an obedient citizen and should not blame good people, and the captain told the policeman that there were no traces of people near the other victims, so the guy was not involved. The captain noticed a camera at the entrance to the alley and it could have recorded the real killer, but it would be strange if this time the criminal did not take into account the location of the cameras as in previous times. The policeman clearly did not like the fact that he had to let the only suspect go and shouted that he would not allow this and let the guy confess who he was and what he was doing here. By this time, the injured man had come to his senses and joined the conversation, saying that Fong Ning was not a killer, but his savior, which shocked the policeman. Then the policeman ran up to the victim with a lot of questions about what happened here and how he survived the attack of this beast in the person of Fong Ning. But the injured man could not adequately perceive the situation and barely uttered words, so he could not explain anything to the concerned policeman. Then the policeman realized that his interrogation was inappropriate for a person in such a serious condition and, supporting the man by the arms, he called an ambulance. At that moment, the captain approached Fong Ning and asked in a calm tone if he was a soul hunter, and this question surprised the guy. Fong Ning did not want to immediately expose his identity and mentally advised Jiangli that he should not admit his abilities, because this could become the reason for their elimination as well. The captain perceived the guy's pause as an absolute lack of knowledge about who the soul hunters were, which means he was self-awakened. Seeing that the guy was embarrassed, the captain explained that he was still too young and his thoughts could be read in his face. The captain handed the guy his business card and told him that the next time he wants to lie, he should better watch his facial expressions and gestures. Fong Ning read the name on the business card and the captain added that if the guy had any difficulties, he should contact him. While walking, Captain John warned Fong Ning to be more careful with this kind of thing in the future, because this is not a toy and needs certain skills. With a clear conscience, Fong Ning left the place, and Captain Jan looked after him and clearly liked the guy as a person. While the police were still in the act, they were being secretly watched from the roof of a tall skyscraper. It was the same stranger with a dwarf monster in her arms, who was glad that she was able to escape from the hunters. The stranger felt sorry that the soul he worked on for 6 months was so easily taken away, but the monster gave up on it and said to go to another city. The disappointed guy agreed, but the thought of having to start all over again was very depressing. He approached the edge of the building, stood up and prepared to jump from an incredible bird's-eye view. With the help of the power of a magical creature, the guy smoothly flew down as if on wings and no longer worried about the annoying hunters. The rain flooded the streets of the city and covered the roads with its smooth surface, and Fong Ning went in search of a hairpin in the pouring rain, not intending to stop until he reached what he wanted. Jiangli still felt her hairpin somewhere nearby and added that the monster was injured, so it would not be able to escape away from them. Fong Ning asked the girl why she didn't catch that monster child when she had the opportunity. She replied that that middle-aged man had too much yang energy and she couldn't stand in front of him. The guy again asked what kind of magical mud it was from the dwarf monster, which shackled him and he could not get out of it on his own. The girl replied that it was spiritual power and you can use soul power or spiritual power, but you need to be much stronger than the caster. Fong Ning did not quite understand what he was talking about, and Jiangli added that he had used spiritual power before, and that the power of the soul belongs to the soul body, and spiritual power exists in everyone's body. But for most people, it only appears at the edge of life and death, and then they have a chance for spiritual power to be released and manifest itself far beyond ordinary power. Fong Ning was sure that Jiangli had lost her memory, but she explained that after eating delicious food for 2 days, some of her memories began to become clearer. He theorized that he had little spiritual power and that was why he could not escape the clutches of the dwarf monster. Jiangli objected to this and explained that his power should have been much greater given the strength of her soul, but Fong Ning does not know how to use it and takes everything too simply and needs to learn how to release spiritual power. Fong Ning was surprised that there was a power hidden within him that he did not know about, and he asked the girl how to release it, but she replied that it takes a lot of time to practice. To somehow cheer up the guy, the girl came up with something that could help him, or if not, then it definitely wouldn't hurt him. She acquired her usual size and approached Fong Ning so that she felt his breath on her skin and asked him not to move. Jiangli pulled him close and kissed him tenderly, making Fong Ning's eyes almost pop out of his head in amazement. A second after that, they fell into some strange blue space and seemed to be floating to the bottom in water. Fong Ning looked around and asked in horror where they were, since they were the only ones on the street. Jiangli replied that they had fallen into the sea of his consciousness, and as long as there was an agreement between them, she could come here with her husband. The guy didn't know why they were here and reminded the girl that they needed to hurry before the dwarf monster ran away. She reassured him that in the sea of consciousness, time moves tens of times slower than in the outside world and the monster will not be able to escape from them, and meanwhile she will teach Fong Ning how to use energy. Fong Ning was shocked when he didn't notice any clothes on their bodies and asked the girl in surprise why this was. But the girl calmly explained that clothes interfered with the perception of spiritual energy and therefore she took them off. The lesson began and the guy, with his eyes closed, listened to Liar's instructions about how you need to feel that the movement of spiritual energy begins with the Tan. Next, you should follow the direction of the movements of her finger and try to mobilize your spiritual energy. Real magic began to happen around, and Fong Ning was all glowing from the amount of his own spiritual energy. The lesson was over and they returned to the outside world, but Fong Ning was no longer the same as before, and felt a strange fulfillment and harmony. Even his eyes seemed to be on fire from the spiritual power that Jiangli had revealed to him, and now he was much stronger than ever. He was all beaming and finally realized what Liar was talking about, and his spiritual power was now completely at his disposal. At that moment, he left the ground and flew into the sky using his spiritual power and enjoyed it. Jumping onto the roof of a skyscraper, the city was in full view, and they easily spotted their enemy. Just like them, the monster moved around the city with the help of buildings, and it is difficult for ordinary people to see, which is what he was counting on. Carefully crossing the distance between buildings, the criminal did not suspect that anyone could be watching him. However, the monster inside immediately sensed the danger and ordered to quickly get out of there before it was too late. The criminal was surprised that the soul hunter was so strong, but the monster objected that if it weren't for the essence inside him, he would have died of suffocation. The monster recalled the details of their fight and noted that the soul inside the hunter was at least level 4, if not higher. The criminal landed on the ground near a parked motorcycle, wondering how best to avoid pursuit. He reassured his monster that there were spiritual barriers in their base, and the monster added that even if the hunter overcomes them, he will not get out of there alive. Having calmed down and no longer caring about pursuing the hunters, the criminal started his motorcycle and was ready to go to the base. However, a voice from nowhere interrupted their idyll and said that without the help of a living person and working alone, they could not escape from police persecution. This information took the criminal by surprise, and he turned around to see the owner of these words and understand who he was dealing with. Fong Ning continued his thoughts and told the criminal that he was most likely the third tomb robber who had escaped from the princess's grave. Fong Ning also remembered that he had seen this man before and was wanted by the police a few months ago. The criminal realized that he had been caught and now had nowhere to go, because the guy found out everything that had been hidden for a long time. Fong Ning did not want to stand on ceremony for long and switched to a crude method of explaining to the villains their guilt and connected his spiritual power. A child monster joined the fray and warned Fong Ning not to bully others too much. But to Fong Ning his warning did not cost anything, and he insisted to the monster that when he killed innocent people, he never thought that they would do the same to him, but if the monster gave them the hairpin, then Fong Ning would give him a quick death. The monster mocked as if they needed a certain thing, this pin, and if they wanted it so badly, he would give it away, but in a different way. Taking out a hairpin, the monster directed its power at the hunters, angrily saying that now he would fulfill their desire. Fong Ning stood and watched what would happen from the action of this hairpin, and he was again surrounded by the forces of the monster. With the power of a hairpin, the child monster summoned a big scary dragon and, leading his mane, the monster shouted that it was not worth provoking him. He turned to Fong Ning that his body still had soul powers and today he would make his life worse than death. Dozens of vile eyes stared at the guy, trying to intimidate him while the monster directed its powers towards him. But Fong Ning had already seen this, and this time he easily dealt with the magical mud of the dwarf monster thanks to his spiritual powers. The monster became embittered because some ordinary boy was able to break the powers of his magic and threatens him. And then the monster used his dragon to deal with the impudent woman amid promising cries of death and revenge. But Fong Ning was powerful enough to cope with even such a monster as a dragon, so he accepted the fight. His strength was enough to overcome the dragon and break the dark forces of the monster's magic, and with his fire he cleansed that place of evil. For the dwarf monster this was simply unacceptable and he still could not believe that he was defeated. Therefore, he made another attempt to confront Fong Ning, because he thought that he was strong and powerful and no one could overcome him. And he took the hairpin again and, using all his remaining strength, wanted to strike the hunters, but his tactics worked against him. Jiang Li entered the battle next and Fong Ning encouraged her to finally finish off that scum and take what was hers. She created a barrier from her soul power and this time was aimed only at victory, because the games were over and it was time to get what she deserved. The collision of the two forces was quite large-scale and stretched over several meters, and while the battle continued, the hairpin flew out of the monster's hands. But then Fong Ning came to the rescue and, arriving on time, was the first to reach the hairpin, shouting victorious words that it was all over. At that moment, his hand was engulfed by the black tongues of magic of the dwarf monster, who did not consider that the battle was over. However, Fan was no longer afraid of his forces and he broke through them without any effort, which angered and frightened the monster. The confrontation continued, but both sides knew about the conclusion of this battle, so there was no longer any point as such, because Fong Ning had shown what he was capable of. As soon as the monster directed the soul powers at Fong Ning, Liar appeared, flew up and began to absorb them with appetite. The disgusting child just shouted for them to immediately give him the Horcrux, because it was his thing and should belong to him. Fong Ning noticed that with the hairpin in his hands, the monster did not have the strength to overcome him, so it was better not to know what would happen if he now had the hairpin. Fong Ning's last words before the final blow were an imperative appeal to repent of his sins. The monster continued to shout about returning the hairpin to him, because it was his only hope of becoming a 4th-level soul. Dissolving into dozens of drops of water, the hunters heard words that he had not yet taken revenge and still wanted to become stronger and could not come to terms with it. In the last seconds of his stay on Earth, the ghost showed who he really was and the hunters heard a gentle child's voice calling his mother. It also said that it could not breathe underwater, it was in terrible pain and it was waiting for its mother to save it, and these were its last dying thoughts. The surprised hunters stood listening to the pitiful voice of an innocent child, who said that she did not have time to find him. The last piece of the baby's soul moved into Fong Ning's head and he found himself in some dark abyss of memories and pictures. They found themselves in the mind of that baby and Fong Ning asked if Liar knew what infanticide was and continued that some parents give birth to children, but do not raise them. Of course, for Fong Ning himself, drowning his own child was beyond comprehension, having seen a fragment of the death of this baby. From the pictures in his head, Fong Ning realized that he had been drowned by his own father by that monster, the child soon after birth, and out of resentment and desire to survive, he became a ghost. All these victims were a projection of his father and he wanted to make them suffer and die in agony just like him, and this was the only way to throw out his pain and anger on the world. While Liar was finishing her dinner, Fong Ning asked what obsession made him exist for thousands of years and not leave the princess's tomb. Their conversation was interrupted by someone's presence and turning around, Fong Ning saw a knife pointed at him. But he, without looking, grabbed the knife blade with 2 fingers and said boringly that the child is a ghost on which you relied has dissipated, and you continue to try to somehow influence me. This was the same criminal, although Fong Ning thought that he would take advantage of the chaos and simply run away, but he stood in front of him and openly threatened him. Without uttering a word, Fong Ning broke the attacker's knife with 2 fingers, as if it were fragile plastic. Then the attacker got really scared and fell to the ground in confusion, not knowing what to do next. Realizing what had happened, he grabbed his head and said that now they would find him and kill him, because Fong Ning killed a ghost. Fong Ning did not want to listen to his whining and, pressing him by the throat to the wall, clearly stated that he would ask questions and the criminal would answer. To save his life, he was ready to do anything, so he agreed to Fong Ning's conditions and would answer all questions. The interrogation began and Fong Ning's first question was how and under what circumstances did this man meet the ghost of a child. The criminal obediently replied that 6 months ago he went to Chang Baidao to find out certain information and said that he had a large order for him. At that time, the husband was having a hard time and the generous reward tempted him to agree to the business and he invited 2 more with him. Fang Ning wanted to clarify some details to clarify the picture in his head and asked the man who Chang Baidao was. He replied that this is a person who disseminates information in their industry and works for a large organization, and thanks to him the man always had a job. Then their task was to dig up something from the princess's grave, and without further ado, Chang Baidao gave him a seemingly ordinary jar and said that it could only be opened at the princess's grave and the thing they were looking for would be found. But curiosity won and the man opened the jar back at the hotel and thus a ghost child appeared. The man spoke about the terrible torture he endured that night and how the ghost mocked him and took over his body and mind. He came to his senses when he found himself at the princess's grave with 2 of his brothers, and after telling them this story, they wanted to run away until the ghost disappeared, but a monster appeared from under the ground with a hairpin and attached it to her husband. At this time, ghosts began to attack them from different sides and, fearing for their lives, the man agreed to hunt with the ghost child if he helped to escape, but his comrades could not be saved, and after a while the man saw on the news that they had gone crazy. The husband repented that the ghost forced him to do all the terrible things, because he promised wealth and protection from the police, and for refusal he was threatened with death, but he needs to live and needs money for his seriously ill son. Fang Ning reacted to this coldly, because if a man says that he cannot die, then were all the people whose relatives are now much more difficult than him worth dying? The husband fell to his knees in front of Fang Ning and asked for forgiveness, begging him not to kill him or hand him over to the police. He understood that he had made a terrible mistake and caused a lot of harm to other people, but all this was for the sake of his son, with whom he was left alone after the death of his mother. Fang Ning said that he didn't need his apology and would rather sympathize with the families of the deceased if he really felt guilty. The last thing Fang Ning was interested in was where Chang Baidao could be found and how they contacted each time, but the man replied that he was too mysterious a person and his location was always unpredictable. The man continued that most orders are made online and their goods are delivered to the specified location, and the money is transferred to foreign accounts, and Chang Baidao always finds them himself and they never know where and when it will be. Fang Ning listened to him and ordered him to give his phone, but the man thought it was a joke. But Fang Ning's serious expression said otherwise. He wrote down his contact information there and ordered to contact him when Chang Baidao made himself known. Having completed his manipulations, Fang Ning threw the phone back into the man's hands and was surprised by this conclusion of the evening. He asked if he could really be free and wasn't Fang Ning going to call the police to have him arrested. Fang Ning replied that without a child, the ghosts would find him quickly, so if he wants to save his son, he should hurry up and take care of the families of the dead, because he has enough money. The man bowed his head in a heartfelt bow and thanked Fang Ning for her generosity and mercy, as well as the idea of atonement for his sins. Fang Ning added that he hoped that if the source of evil was eliminated, the man should choose the right path. His voice barely reached the man's ears, but he understood the last part very clearly, and it was a warning not to allow himself to stumble again. The man stood alone in the middle of the street, as if forgotten by the whole world, without support or advice, but Fang Ning's voice aroused hope for salvation in his soul. He once again silently thanked Fang Ning and promised that after he completed all his affairs, he would definitely surrender to the police for his crimes. Walking along an empty street, Fang Ning asked Liar if he did the right thing, because despite all the difficulties in life, this man caused a lot of harm. He said he didn't want his children to feel the same way he did, being left on his own in the world. Liar replied that she respected his decision and he became very strong in a short period of time and was able to overcome the powerful ghost and was proud of him. She also thanked him for helping her find her hairpin and she wanted to thank him for that. He dismissed her with the words that he was also interested in returning her hairpin and, changing the topic, asked what she thought about Chang Baidao. Liar was very upset that Fang Ning treated her so coldly and ignored any manifestations of her feelings. Having calmed down, she turned to him and said that she didn't think anything, but Fang Ning was alarmed that she had been thinking about it for so long. He realized that he had offended her and approached her, gently stroking her hair, so that she had forgotten about all her images. Her heart was filled with tenderness, and the unforgettable image of her beloved man, whom she loved with all her heart, was imprinted in her eyes. She saw a different side of him, as if they had known each other thousands of years ago, and he said that he bought a beautiful hairpin especially for her, reproducing her beauty. She remembered the love of her life and the tenderness and awe that filled her heart next to him. Fong Ning's touch took her to a unique world of pleasant memories, and she felt that she was remembering much more than before. Her hairpin helped her become complete, as she was, but forgot without enough soul strength. Looking into Fong Ning's eyes, she thanked him with a reverent feeling for the opportunity to feel real again. She took his hand in hers and burst into tears from her overwhelming happiness and from the feeling of completeness. The sea of her consciousness was filled with another wonderful memory and a pleasant feeling of strength and power. Unexpectedly for Fong Ning, she created a whirlpool of force energy that shook the peace of the night streets. Closing her eyes, she was conscious and her clothes themselves began to tear into pieces. A second later, she was left completely naked, covering herself only with her energy and the strength of her soul. Blinded by her light, Fong Ning was outraged that she would again try to rip her clothes off like last time. However, the ritual did not concern him, because she turned into her real self and reproduced her image. Among the clothes on her leg there was a small fragile bracelet that emphasized and complemented her beauty. Her look was complete and she appeared in an exquisite red dress, framed with assorted flowers, with puffed sleeves and a long hem. It was as if her inner strength could not fit inside her and splashed out in the form of bright orange rays. With a powerful beam, she also touched Fong Ning, who had never experienced such a strong surge of energy. He accepted this gift and felt incredibly fulfilled, as if his strength had doubled under the influence of Liar's magic. His emotions went so high that he could not restrain himself and shouted at the top of his voice with all his strength, so that his strength burst out. This powerful beam struck the sky like lightning, which attracted the attention of uninvited spectators going about their business on the roof of the high-rise building. These were ghost hunters who, seeing such a strong release of spiritual power, became interested in who could wield it, because it did not seem like something familiar. They decided to first clean up the traces of the hunt and then go check what happened in the city center. But they did not take into account that the monsters were still lying in wait for them and were ready to attack again at any second. Taking advantage of the moment when the hunter lost her vigilance, the monsters decided to end her life and prepared to strike. But the monsters did not take into account that they were dealing with experienced professionals, and hearing some movements behind them, the huntress immediately reacted. She turned around in one motion and accepted the fight, in which she was obviously confident of her victory. Another building in this city was seething with its own history, but the strange events in the city did not leave anyone indifferent. Two unfamiliar men were interrogating a criminal we already knew, and even they were distracted by the release of such a powerful beam of energy. One of them said that the traces of the ghost child had disappeared and it might be the work of the soul hunters, and he warned him not to be so dismissive. The second of these strangers was Chang Baidao, who said that they would have to find out who was behind this, but for now that was all, and they should get rid of this person, of whom there was no longer any use. The servant humbly accepted the order and went to carry it out with pleasure, because he liked killing people like nothing else. The bound man begged not to kill him, because they promised to release him if he answered all the questions. The servant smiled sarcastically at his husband and said that he lied to him about his freedom and planned to kill him anyway. Having finished the job, the servant turned around and walked towards the exit, leaving the dead body of the man in the middle of the room. Captain Jan also did not stay away from this energy explosion and, contemplating the sky, talked about where it came from. His partner, a young lieutenant, noticed the strange reaction and asked what was the matter, but the captain waved it off, saying that he just remembered something. The captain turned around and left, leaving Xiao Wang to go and rest, and received a response of consent and the phrase that they would see each other tomorrow at the police station. Conscientiously following the captain's order, Xiao Wang thought to himself that this was too suspicious and something serious was happening, but they were not telling him about it. At that time, Fong Ning could barely cope with the energy bursting inside him, believing that he could not cope with the super-powerful surge of power. However, he managed to master this power, although the feeling of being overwhelmed scared him to such a state that he thought he was about to burst. Liar sensed that someone was approaching them and told Fong Ning that they needed to get out of there, to which the guy agreed. As usual, they flew with Liar's magic and arrived safely at Fong Ning's apartment before sunrise. Fong Ning immediately closed the curtains on the window and said anxiously that his power beam of light was probably seen by the whole city and tomorrow they would write about it in all the newspapers. Liar reassured him that ordinary people could not see spiritual energy unless it was condensed into a solid. He asked why there was so much power this time, and Liar answered that a small part was absorbed by the ghost child, and most of it was concentrated in her hairpin, and this was probably 1/10 of her strongest state. This information upset the guy a little, because he could barely withstand 1/10 of her strength, and it's hard to imagine how powerful Liar was in her prime. Fong Ning happily asked if she remembered anything else if her strength returned, and she began to talk hesitantly. However, it was too difficult for her to talk about it and she was afraid of it, what her subconscious told her. Fong Ning understood that it was difficult for her and did not force himself to overpower, giving her time to come to her senses and perceive everything that happened in her head. Liar was glad that he understood her and supported her, so she jumped out of bed and, in joy, hugged him tightly, saying that she would always be there, no matter what happened. But their idol was transformed by the sound of a message on Fong Ning's phone, and he immediately began to check what was sent to him. It was the message from Director Wang that the video about Haiyuan School had skyrocketed into thousands of views. Fong Ning decided to check it out, and when he went to the page, he was just crazy about how viral the video had become. Views poured in at an incredible speed, and within 3 hours of the video's release, the video gained more than 1 million viewers. The comments simply exploded with delight from the audience, and Fong Ning rejoiced at the well-deserved popularity he had been waiting for so long. The guy's eyes lit up with glory, and he was happy that this video had become more popular even than the previous one from the princess's tomb. His head was bursting with thoughts that such popularity would open up new opportunities for him to advertise, sell his goods and film new broadcasts. His thoughts about glory were interrupted by a strange feeling, and he looked around to understand what was going on. It was Liar inside him who said that he should look into the sea of his consciousness, and her tone did not expect denial. Together they found themselves again in the blue watery environment, descending into the depths of consciousness. What Fong Ning saw there surprised him as he looked at it, that last time everything looked different. In the sea of Fong Ning's consciousness, there were so many golden dolphins swimming that they covered almost the entire space, illuminating it. Liar explained that these dolphins represent his fear, and being in fear, the sea of consciousness overflows with this energy. She leaned against his back and gently asked him to close his eyes to demonstrate something, although he already knew what will happen. Their clothes disappeared and they were completely naked again, feeling each other's bodies and the deep space of the sea of consciousness. They moved through the sea like fish, feeling every flow of energy and power of the guy's consciousness. Meanwhile, in the real world, Fong Ning had finally found harmony between the external and internal and normalized the flow of energy caused by fear. He speculated that such intense fear energy could have been generated by his popular video. This power in his hands made Fong Ning confident that with such strength, he would have defeated the ghost child without Liar's help. However, all the events that happened today tired Fong Ning in a certain way, and he realized that he needed rest. While taking a warm shower, he scrolled through all the recent events in his head about the soul of a dead child, a soul hunter, the mysterious policeman Zhang Tandao, and the lost memory of Jiang Li, and realized that the world had changed for him. And a secret organization of tomb robbers appeared, and this further turned his view of the world. Although it is both interesting and dangerous, he made an agreement and cannot back down. And he is ready to decisively fight against evil and perceive this world in a new way, discovering his true inner strength. Tired from the eventful events of the day, Fong Ning tried to sleep, but he was disturbed by strange dreams, and Liar noticed this. She approached him, caring about his condition and putting her hand on his forehead, trying to wake him up from unpleasant dreams. Using the magic of transformation, she dissolved her clothes into thin air, leaving her completely naked. She wanted to go to bed with her beloved man and spend the night next to him, because she had been waiting for this for thousands of years. She was overwhelmed with joy that she was where she wanted and should be, because in recent years she had been too lonely. She had been waiting for this moment for hundreds of years, and, falling asleep on her beloved's shoulders, she finally experienced peace and satisfaction that her expectations were not in vain. Fong Ning was still in the dream world, unaware that there was a naked Liar in bed next to him. His dream was so realistic that it haunted him, and little he looked like a building with people inside engulfed in flames. However, He didn't feel a bit sorry for either the building or the people burning alive, because he had dreamed about this day all his life. A warm sunny morning arrived, waking up the sleepy city, telling people about the beginning of a new day. The blonde guy, as usual, carried out his morning routine in the bathroom and looked in the mirror while brushing his teeth. But his usual morning was interrupted by a message on his phone, which he did not expect, so he immediately responded. Still brushing his teeth, he marveled at the flood of news that had happened in just one morning. The message was that his video had lost first place to some newbie who had risen to the top last night. He became very angry, not understanding what kind of video could get more than 3 million views in one night, because it used to be the most popular. He ran out of the bathroom and headed to the computer to watch the video that could move him from first place. He was interested in what exactly in this video could surpass his primacy and the owner of this work. The clock struck 10 o'clock in the morning, but the guy had no time, because there was nothing more important than his blog and first place among competitors. His disappointment knew no bounds, because the video really was incredibly cool and deserves recognition. But an idea arose in his head and he wrote a comment under this video about the unbearable desire to see the continuation of Lien Xiang's story. He wanted to further excite the enthusiasm of the author of the video and wrote that Station B in the modern generation also deserves attention. Meanwhile, morning came and Fong Ning's apartment tried to wake up our heroes with a light warm breeze. But so far he had not succeeded, because the magical spouses were still basking in bed, in no hurry. Lyre spent that night next to Fong Ning, which is what she wanted most for so long, and her fragile legs with a bracelet were wrapped in the sun's rays. Their bodies were too close and unconsciously Fong Ning hugged Lyre while in a sleepy state of night dreams. The dream was so emotional that Fong Ning said what he saw and recalled with appetite the delicious steamed buns and rice lashes. In his dream, he basked on a huge delicious bun, holding 2 others in both hands, which he savored with pleasure in turn. But nearby he noticed something tastier and more appetizing and, of course, he was attracted by its smell and huge size. He attacked the huge rice cake, saying that it was incredibly soft and tasty, tasting every centimeter. But then he opened one eye and realized that he was not dreaming, because the sensation seemed too real. He closed his eyes again and felt a delicious, mouth-watering bun, which beckons with its tenderness and pleasant texture. But having separated the dream from reality, he realized that these were not rice cakes, because Lyre was sleeping next to him and obviously he came across her charms. The realization of what was happening shocked him and he screamed with all his strength while still lying in bed. He jumped out of bed as if scalded, tearing off the blanket, clearly in a mood for conflict from surprise. Lyre was still too sleepy to understand what was happening and slowly got out of bed, rubbing her eyes from sleep. Just the sight of a naked girl in his bed made Fong Ning's nose bleed like a fountain. Lyre was very worried about this and she approached the guy to help cope with the bleeding. The fact that she tried to help in the nude made the guy's condition even worse and he screamed at her not to move. Catching the flow of blood with his hand, Fong Ning ran to the table where there were napkins to stop the bleeding as quickly as possible. The girl was seriously scared for Fong Ning while he was trying to cope with the heavy bleeding and she did not understand what could cause such a reaction. After making small rolls out of the napkins, Fong Ning stuffed his nose with them and shouted at Lyre to get dressed immediately. Finally, she began to guess why he was reacting so aggressively towards her and did not want to cause unnecessary conflicts. Slowly, she stood on the floor, fulfilling her husband's requests for the clothes she needed. Using the magic of transformation, she again began to create new clothes for herself to please her lover. After completing her transformation, she turned to Fong Ning to take a look at her new style and evaluate her appearance. However, her new look surprised the guy, because it was radically different from her previous outfit. She stood before him wearing leg warmers just above her hips and a luxurious short dress that combined red and white with gold accents on the sleeves. This look suited her incredibly well, given the delicate elements on the cell that drew attention to itself. Fong Ning was surprised that Lyre was standing in front of the window, basking in the sun's rays, because she had never been able to be directly exposed to the sun before. Lyre showed her hairpin and said that with its help she had regained some of her strength and now could not be afraid of daylight. While hardening her hair, she heard from Fong Ning that her usual clothes were different from what she was wearing now, and she replied that he himself told her that a long skirt was not comfortable. Fong Ning thought it was too strange that a ghost could come during the day. He doubted that Liar was a ghost and not something else. Liar threw herself into Fong Ning's arms, happy that he liked her new image and was able to please him. At that moment, a phone call rang throughout the room and Fong Ning looked with his eyes where he left his phone. With a respectful look, he pushed Liar away from him and said that he needed to answer the call. He was alarmed by this unexpected call and did not know what to expect from it, but decided to find out anyway. It was Director Wang who called on the phone, who personally wanted to inform him that Fong Ning's video had hit the top. Having recently experienced a storm of emotions regarding this information, Fong Ning already said in a fairly calm tone that he knew about the success of his work. Director Wang continued that several companies had already contacted him to feature their advertisements in the next video, each of which cost tens of dollars. Fong Ning advised not to rush with advertising, so as not to lose the favor of viewers for the sake of dubious fame, and asked whether the director had previously collaborated with streamers. Director Wang replied that he worked with one streamer, but the number of his subscribers could not be compared to Fong Ning's in one night. Fong Ning offered him an agreement under which he would shoot videos and create content, and Director Wang would edit and operate the videos, thereby doubling the popularity of the account. The director doubted for a second whether his small studio could cope with such promise and popularity as Fong Ning's, but he countered that he was completely satisfied with the previous collaboration and had a good impression of his studio. Then Fong Ning used a win-win move, saying that if the director does not want to cooperate with him, it does not matter and he will find someone else. This maneuver prompted Director Wang to make a decision and happily agreed to a partnership with the young streamer. Then the director moved on to the topic of profit distribution, offering different percentage options, but Fong Ning offered him more than he expected. Fong Ning explained such generosity by the fact that at the beginning of his journey, all the studios refused him when asking the price, and only Director Wang's studio showed enough respect and quality service, for which he now wants to thank him. The director was touched by these words and said that he would try with all his might to promote the account and provide all the necessary services so as not to let down the respected Fong Ning. In parting, Fong Ning asked the director to send him the contract by mail, but in the meantime he had other matters that required his attention. Looking through the comments, Fong Ning began to understand why he had so much fear power, because the video had gone viral and he was wondering how much Liar was able to restore her strength with the release of his energy. Having completed all his business at the computer, Fong Ning stood up from the table and turned around to tell Liar that everything was fine and exactly as he wanted. Liar asked what was the matter and Fong Ning asked her if his yesterday's power of fear was enough for her to restore her strength. She replied that at the first meeting at the princess's grave there was much more energy and she was still far from full recovery. She visualized the bullet for him to clearly show that at the time of its heyday, it was completely filled, and now there is only a quarter of the strength there, if not less. Fong Ning was upset that her recovery was still so far away and they could not be sure that this strength would be enough to overcome the monster of the Haiyuan school, but Liar said that the chances were very high, so there was nothing to worry about. This cheered the guy up, but before getting down to business he suggested eating and resting to regain strength. He resolutely announced that they would go to Haiyuan school tonight and finish the job. For Liar, this was a sign that a delicious dinner awaited her and she was looking forward to the evening. The long-awaited night came, covering all the mystical mysteries of the city that our heroes planned to reveal. In full combat readiness, Fong Ning waited for the right moment to go to meet the monster again. He opened the window that had recently replaced their front door and ordered Liar to prepare for the journey. She understood everything from the first word and, as usual, walked up to him and took him by the shoulders for the upcoming flight. This time, Liar rushed like the wind and Fong Ning did not have time to understand what happened, frightened by such a sudden gust. However, they were not the only visitors to the school that night because recently a popular blogger also wanted a video with ghosts. But the atmosphere of that mystical place seriously frightened him, and for his fear he received a kick from his partner. He added that fear is not appropriate here, because in front of them is the very place that embodied fame and popularity, so they need to adapt to the wave, and not run away from it. The frightened guy understood that this was his only chance to regain his popularity, but the thought of the ghosts of that place did not leave him. Already in a friendly manner, the partner put his hand on the guy's shoulder and said that it was all fake and high-quality special effects using various mechanisms, and there are a lot of such paranormal videos on the internet now. At that moment, he felt someone grab him by the shoulder, and with horror on his face, both screamed in voices that were not their own in fear. They began to drink drinks, as if they had seen a real ghost, while the young girl stood and watched two grown men shed tears. In an authoritative tone, she said that they agreed to meet at the entrance to the school, and not hide behind a tree and think that she is a ghost, and if they are such cowards, let them return home. Still recovering from fright, the man said that uninhabited and abandoned places still make people feel ants. Playing a nice tone, the guy turned to the director and said that the popular video was shot using special effects machines, but they didn't take anything with them, so there was no point in competing. The girl got angry, because they never had any special equipment and they came here straight for reconnaissance. She took out her notebook and began jotting down ideas for the title of a new video about exposing the illusion of the most popular video about the real story of Haiyuan Elementary School, and the man standing next to him obsequiously agreed with everything she suggested. The manager noticed his faintly amiable tone and waved her hand, saying that it was time for them to go to the shooting location. But the guy approached her and said in horror that he heard someone approaching there and some sound was heard from the forest. In the depths of the forest, two figures of a woman and a man could be seen, who were our heroes, but the uninvited guests did not yet know about it. Their first opinion was that these were the same ghosts that the Haiyuan legend speaks of, and they screamed at the top of their voices in fear. Fong Ning and Liar found a strange picture of two grown men hiding behind a tiny, fragile girl, believing that they saw ghosts while she screamed at them, humiliating their already low dignity. Having recovered, the man straightened up and said in his defense that these people were definitely not ghosts as they might have thought, because ghosts do not exist. The girl began to dialogue with the couple, apologizing for her gentle colleagues, and Fong Ning asked who they were and what they were doing here. The man introduced himself as Zhang Xiao and, without hesitation, told it like it was, that they had come here to see the location from the sensational video and evaluate whether they could film something similar. His words were echoed by others present, the guy Mao Xing, who was Zhang's assistant, and their leader Lin Huang, who was involved in live broadcasts. And then the guy seemed to realize that the same blogger from the viral video was standing in front of him, whom he did not immediately recognize. His companions did not quite understand what he was talking about, and the guy explained that this was the same blogger who received the title of the strongest newcomer this year, and through his video they came here. The leader understood what was going on, but Mao Xing's elusive words could ruin everything, and she interrupted him while continuing to talk with Fong Ning. She fanatically asked Fong Ning for an autograph, noting the surprisingly unexpected meeting, and asked if she and the girl who also appeared in the video were a couple. Fong Ning didn't want to answer this question, but in Liar's presence he couldn't simply ignore it, so he briefly said that this was his wife. He added that if they want to watch the live broadcast or video of Haiyuan Primary School, they should come back tomorrow afternoon. The husband put forward a claim to Fong Ning, because his name was not listed here, so anyone can shoot a video here. Without reacting in any way, Fong Ning said that real ghosts live in this city and he does not advise coming here at night. Turning to them, he added in a serious tone that their lives might be in danger because of their own rashness. Zhang did not like his warning and shouted to Fong Ning in the back that he knew what special effects he was using and that he did not believe in any ghosts, because if it were true, Fong Ning would not have gotten out of there alive and would not have returned to film the sequel. A strong wind rose, which conveyed to the trio Fong Ning's words that they should return home in order to save their lives, and that's all they need to know, and whether they believe it or not, the choice is theirs. The guy was confused by the incomprehensible origin of this wind in completely calm weather, but for him it will remain a mystery. But then he saw that the couple had already entered the school, probably in order to film a continuation of the video. The man wanted to follow them in order to expose the mysteries of their filming and steal the idea about the popularity of their content, but the guy tried to gently refuse him from this, because it would be very low and unprofessional and he was frankly scared to go there. However, the leader picked up this idea and said that they might not have another opportunity to see how they make such videos, so she went after our heroes. The guy had no choice and he also followed them, because he didn't want to show himself as a coward, especially in front of the leader. Approaching the entrance, they had to pass through a magical barrier, but it was invisible to them, so they did not suspect anything. Plucking up courage, they walked closer, finding themselves in the courtyard of the Haiyuan school, still confident that there were no ghosts there. Fang Ning and Liar were already inside, and the guy sincerely hoped that the trio outside would listen to his advice, because in case of danger, he would not be able to protect them. He asked Liar if she felt the presence of a ghost and where they needed to go to find him. Liar happily replied that she felt the ghost was in the same room upstairs as last time. Fang Ning was delighted and threw the phone into the girl's hands so that she could start filming and was a little embarrassed by such a gesture. While walking up the stairs, Fang Ning called out to Liar that it was time to start recording, set for explosive content. He began to address subscribers in his usual manner, starting with congratulations and telling him that he was again in the mysterious Haiyuan school. He further said that 3 days ago he encountered an unknown monster here and was forced to retreat, but Lian Xiang's soul was still locked away and waiting for him to save her. Approaching the director's office, he continued to say that he could not leave this matter aside and must understand the mysterious events of this place. Kicking down the door to the office, he triumphantly said that he was back and this time he had no plans to retreat. They entered the office, which had been destroyed after their previous visit, and tried to figure out where the monster was hiding. Liar sensed where the monster's energy was concentrated and pointed Fang Ning to the very same comb that was lying on the table. Fan Ning voiced that this comb was probably closely connected with the girl Lian Xiang during her life, which is what keeps her soul here. Touching the scallop, an otherworldly force burst out of it like a volcano, blinding Fang Ning, and he heard the voice of a thundering monster. How dare he return here? The monster showed its ugly face and said that having come here, Fang Ning would now not be able to escape so easily due to the barrier that the monster had placed around the perimeter of the school. Fang Ning was not very interested in this information, because he was sure that he would overcome the monster and no barriers would hold him back. Without further ado, Fang Ning struck the monster with his new power, showing his serious intentions. The monster did not expect to receive such a powerful charge of spiritual power and the blow took him by surprise. The monster shouted to the guy how he could master such power in a few days, guessing that he was probably a hunter of souls. Fang Ning replied that he had always been strong and if he couldn't defeat the monster, he would definitely find a way to do it. The monster was angered by his pompous behavior, because he could not tolerate such bullying and was ready to destroy the guy. The monster carefully prepared for the meeting with the hunter and intended to show him a new level of strength, the likes of which he had never seen before. He appeared before him in impenetrable iron armor, from which only hellish eyes peeped out, and said that Fang Ning's strength was not enough to overcome him and he was prematurely rejoicing. Concentrating its crushing energy in its hands, the monster said that the real battle would begin right now. Showing his invincible power, he added that no one could separate him from Lian Xiang, not even a soul hunter. His strength was indeed too powerful and Fang Ning felt the pressure of the magical field created by the monster. Meanwhile, filming was taking place in the schoolyard and the trio who arrived there were unaware of the events inside. The man told the camera that they were near Haiyuan Primary School to verify the veracity of the legend of this place or to dispel the myth of ghosts. But at that moment, a thunderous voice reached them, shouting about how they dared to return here, and this made the man sweat on his forehead. From the top floor of the school, where the principal's office was located, the monster's incredible anger exploded at the arrogant Fang Ning, who broke out the windows. The frightened blogger fell to the ground in wild fear from the paranormal action he saw. With an explosion, Fang Ning himself flew out of the window, not expecting such a powerful blow from the monster and could not resist this energy. The leader of the trio screamed madly that Fang Ning would simply die if she fell from the 5th floor. Liar saw that Fang Ning was in trouble and flew with all her might to save her husband from tragic death, caring for his life with all her heart. Fortunately, she managed to catch Fang Ning during his fall, thereby saving him from death, and he was incredibly surprised by this. With Fang Ning in her arms, Liar tried to leave this place as quickly as possible, and the three behind were shocked by what had happened and simply looked after them. The guy was still standing with the phone in his hands and, turning to Zhang, asked if he had imagined that the two actually flew. Zhang, in turn, said with a neutral look that these were all such technologies and special effects, because he did not believe in paranormal phenomena. But this time the monster was not ready to let its guests go so easily and flew away after Fong Ning and Liar out the window. He landed on one knee and, under the weight of his body, the earth split into particles and intended to catch up with the impudent troublemakers. The powerful force wave generated by the monster's landing threw back the trio standing in the yard, and then they thought that these could not be special effects. All they had to do was run away as quickly as possible from the rage that fell upon them from the terrible monster. But the monster predicted their fear and that they would want to run away, so he said that none of them would leave here alive. He was seething with anger that someone dared to touch what belonged to him and was not going to leave it unpunished. The school area was covered with a magical force dome, which was cast by the monster so that the victims would not be able to escape from it. The guy from the trio tried to get through the barrier, but, of course, he failed, which he informed his other two friends about. Zhang became angry, saying that he did not believe in this demonism and there was no barrier that could contain it. With acceleration, he tried to break through the monster's magical shield, but when he tried to do this, he was thrown back by the shock wave. And then he was overcome with emotions that their death would occur here, and he regretted that he had not listened to Fong Ning and followed into the monster's lair. The leader was angry with his whining, and she said that now there was no point in regretting anything and their only hope of getting out of there alive was if Fong Ning defeated this monster. Meanwhile, Fong Ning understood that this would not be easy to do, because the monster had some extremely powerful forces, such as an electromagnetic blow or a compressed air mass, and so far he did not know how to resist it. The size of the monster outweighed the tiny Fong Ning by tens of times and the strength was clearly not equal, but the monster was counting on this when delivering its blow. Fong Ning could only quickly dodge the monster's crushing blows until he figured out how to defeat it. Having missed, the monster again hit the ground, splitting it with his iron fist, but this did not harm him, but only made him even more angry. Next to the monster, Fong Ning flew like an insignificant fly, dodging blows every now and then, because one blow could be his last. But he couldn't escape for long and he had to come face to face with the driving force of the ghost and at least try to fight back. The blow was full of a powerful energy charge and a hellish current ran through the guy's body, burning every part of his flesh. Lightning-fast powerful energy raged in the monster's hands, and he threw Fong Ning like an insect without feeling a bit of pain. Having driven his body across the hard ground, Fong Ning was able to recover from such an incredible flow of power that paralyzes him from the inside, preventing him from moving. There were purple blood stains on his hands, indicating deep wounds, but he did not take the pain into account, thinking over the best battle tactics for him. The monster was only consoled by the guy's optimism, saying that he wanted to see how much longer he could withstand his blows. Liar wanted to quietly help her husband by using her magic, but so that in the frame it would look like only he was fighting a monster. She created magical chains that could contain the monster at least for a while and give Fong Ning a rest. And it was more than just in time, because the monster was one step away from destroying Fong Ning and only in front of his face did Liar's magic work. Magic chains bound the monster, not allowing him to complete what he had in mind, and in the frame it looked exactly the way Fong Ning wanted. Realizing that the monster was incapacitated for some time, Fong Ning began to mock him, saying that he was standing in front of him and waiting for him to kill him, which he promised. The monster ordered him to let him go immediately while Fong Ning stood a few meters away and mocked him. But such games did not work with Fong Ning, and he knew that if he let go of the monster, he would immediately attack in response, and then the guy approached the ghost to expose his true account. Fong Ning reasoned that if the ghost was chained to the director's office, then he was the one who committed suicide in this office and used his spiritual power to remove the iron armor from the ghost. His guesses turned out to be correct when he saw the former headmaster of Haiyuan school in front of him, and he also realized that it was the headmaster who killed the innocent Lian Xiang. The man began to make excuses that he did not want to kill the girl, and if she had not resisted he would not have had to use extreme measures. He looked mentally unbalanced, saying that the girl was to blame for everything and she should have stayed with him and not run away. Feeling disgusted by this creature who corrupted minors, Fong Ning punched the director in the face in order to somehow appease his anger. Fong Ning could not restrain his emotions and said that this was a disgusting act towards a very young girl who still had her whole life ahead of her. There was a shadow of conscience and guilt on the director's face, but this would not bring back the life of the innocent Lian Xiang, so it did not affect Fong Ning at all. He was ready to deal with the ghostly pervert, but before that he asked where he was hiding Lien Xiang, and by saying this he would give him a quick death. The feeling of guilt gave way to anger, and the director said that he would not allow Fang Ning to take Lien Xiang away from him at any cost. His anger was so strong that it turned into the middle of power and broke Liar's magic chains, creating a shock wave. Even Liar did not expect such power from a ghost, so she warned Fang Ning to be careful, because they don't know what else this monster could be capable of. However, the monster did not waste any time, and his eyes became bloodshot with rage, and he went on the offensive, trying to overthrow Fang Ning to the ground. The ghost grabbed Fang Ning and threw it with all his might into the wall of the building, which collapsed from the super strong blow. With his body, Fang Ning squeezed into the next wall, which barely withstood the blow without breaking in half, but only cracking at the seams. Immediately behind him, an enraged ghost jumped through the gap in the wall, trying to finish off his victim before he had time to come to his senses, and Fang Ning mentally asked Liar how this could happen. But Liar didn't know under what circumstances the monster's strength began to recover so quickly, despite his and Fang Ning's efforts to eliminate them. The monster acted like a crazy animal and was ready to do anything so that he and Lien Xiang would never be separated. He threw several affected electric balls towards Fang Ning, but he managed to avoid them, remaining unharmed. But before he had time to recover from the previous blow, it was followed by another fiery explosion, which did not leave Fang Ning aside, throwing him into the depths of the building, and he already doubted that this story would end positively for him. However, as usual, Liar appeared just in time, catching Fang Ning's hand to prevent him from crashing into the next wall, which his body would no longer be able to withstand. Using the power of her magic, she began to create chains again in the hope of holding back an even more enraged monster with them. But this time the ghost did not fall into her trap, because he already knew about it and, having gone around all the chains, continued to approach them. His face was disfigured, covered with blood lines, as if blood was leaking from his eyes, and he bared his sharp teeth at Liar, ordering him to disappear from the road. The monster's goal was to destroy the arrogant guy who was preventing him from being with his Lien Xiang, so he launched his thunderous blow, trying to finish off the already wounded Fang Ning. Fang Ning could no longer fight against the strong energy power of the monster and took his blow in pain, but Liar still tried to protect him. A powerful force crushed Fang Ning into the ground, accompanied by a stormy stream of wind and dust spreading from the collision site. Fang Ning's strength was on the brink and, looking at his numerous wounds, Liar offered to deal with the monster herself, because she could not allow the death of her beloved man. Fang Ning did not agree to this and, wiping the blood from his cut lip, ordered Liar to hide in his body to reduce the protection radius. Liar listened to him, and together they began to move away from the monster, thinking through a plan on how to defeat him, because he progressed too quickly in battle. Meanwhile, the monster also changed its tactics, and instead of just destroying the guy, he wanted to leave his soul in this place forever. Liar's strength helped Fang Ning move faster and more energetically, which allowed him to avoid the pursuing attacks of the monster. The guy realized that he needed to get to the director's office, because only there was no magical barrier, and only there could the answer to this story be hidden. From the windows of the building, the monster's magical blows could be seen flashing in an attempt to catch Fang Ning, but so far he had managed to completely avoid them. On the way to the office, another electromagnetic trap from a ghost was waiting for him, and Fang Ning understood that stopping now would mean certain death, and there would be no next opportunity to get so close to the solution. Gritting his teeth, he decided to risk his life to establish justice and defeat evil. Holding his breath, he pushed himself off the ground, radiating all his spiritual power, which was his only hope of success. There was no place for fear in his soul, because he directed all his energy into concentrating confidence and thirst for life. Making his way through the electromagnetic flashes, Fang Ning was not sure that he would succeed, but one attempt is worth 1,000 doubts, so he resolutely went ahead. Behind him, fiery streams of energy were heard, reaching Fang Ning with their hellish heat, heating up the space to the point of impossibility. Having safely made his way through the trap, Fang Ning turned around to look again at what he had to go through, and exhaling, he realized that it was not easy, but he was closer to finding Lien Xiang, and it was worth it. He thought that Lien Xiang only appears in the director's office when someone touches him, and, most likely, she is still there. He reached the director's office, which revealed a huge hole in the wall through which Fang Ning had recently flown out. Immediately after him, the ghost of the director himself entered the office, saying that now Fang Ning had nowhere to run. The demonic face of the monster broke into a smile and he said that today everyone, those three on the street and Fan Ning and the girl inside him, will die, because no one will break their connection with Lian Xiang. Fan Ning stood at the desk and looked at the wooden comb and said that Lian Xiang's soul was probably hidden here. The monster looked at the guy in surprise, as if not expecting him to guess everything so quickly and expose his actions. Fang Ning swung to crush the comb and free Lian Xiang, and the monster tried in every possible way to stop him. Concentrating all his spiritual power into one blow, Fang Ning hit the table where the comb was located with a crash. A spell appeared in front of him that did not allow him to destroy the magic of the comb, and he began to further reflect that the last time Lian Xiang was seen alive was in this office and it was here that her soul first appeared to him, so there was only one conclusion. Taking the comb in his hands, he said that there was probably a secret space in this room and this table was the very magic node that would open this space. The director was furious that Fang Ning had guessed everything, but he couldn't just let him get into the secret space, so he prepared for a crushing blow, saying that he would never allow him to separate him from Lian Xiang. Seeing that danger was approaching her beloved, Lyre could not stay away and used magic to strike back. But her strength was not enough and the monster prevailed, pinning them to a dead end while Lyre still tried to resist. The monster was too strong and, concentrating a new energy charge, directed it at the defenseless hunters. Fang Ning watched as the power ball of energy approached Lyre and fear and despair froze in her eyes. The monster's energy erupted in a firestorm as it reached its destination and he thought it was all over. On his disfigured face one could see incredible joy and pleasure from yet another murder that warmed his black soul. His dark eyes burned with hellish fire, reflecting the magical flames in the office with which he destroyed the hunters. But his joy was premature, because Fang Ning managed to save Lyre, protecting him from the monster's super-powerful blow. Taking advantage of the moment when the monster lost its vigilance, they discovered a portal to a secret space and hurried to it. Meanwhile, in the secret space was an exhausted Lian Xiang, chained by chains that kept her in the air. Hearing the sound, she looked up and saw a portal opening in front of her. As usual, she knew that this monster was coming to mock her again, but this time the long-awaited saviors appeared from the portal. Her joy knew no bounds when she saw Fang Ning as the only hope for her salvation and her heart was filled with incredible relief. They were not going to waste time and Fang Ning immediately went to free the girl, and Lyre returned to the portal, because the monster could appear at any second. Fang Ning told the girl that he had come to fire her, as promised, and at that time Lyre was trying to hold back the portal from the invasion of the director's ghost. With his spiritual power, Fang Ning broke the chains that had bound Lian Xiang's fragile hands for 10 years. Exhausted, she fell onto Fang Ning's chest, feeling incredible relief in her arms without the burden of shackles. It was not possible to contain the Lyre portal for a long time and the ghost entered the secret space shouting for Fan Ning to take his hands from Lian Xiang. Fang Ning looked too confident and said that he came here to kill the evil monster and carry Lian Xiang away, so he would not retreat until he accomplished his plan. Putting on a mask of courtesy, the ghost told Lian Xiang in a pleasant tone to be a good girl and come to him and then he would protect her. Lian Xiang, in turn, hid behind Fang Ning, as if it was the safest place in all the land. The ghost hoped that she would immediately choose him if such a choice arose, but he was destined to be refused, which greatly upset him. Sadness gradually grew into disappointment, and then into the anger of a bloodthirsty monster who was not going to give up on Lian Xiang so easily. His rage acquired incredible proportions, because Lian Xiang had no right to refuse him and choose some boy instead of him. The greatest battle between the sides of good and evil was approaching, and the monster did not want to spare anyone, preparing a cruel reprisal against the thieves of his property. The trio of bloggers were still outside and exchanging guesses about what was happening inside the school, because after the explosion everything had calmed down and they were worried whether our heroes were alive. Zhang said that perhaps a winner had already emerged and he hoped that Fang Ning had defeated the ghost, otherwise they would all be finished. The head noticed some strange activity at the entrance to the school, as if something was trying to break out, and it didn't seem like it to her, because a stream of shining energy poured out of the doors with incredible speed, destroying everything in its path. The shock wave of a powerful explosion of energy also touched the trio in the courtyard, who were caught in the force field of this blow. All three lost consciousness after receiving an energy blast from the depths of the school building. The monster furiously shouted that no one would separate him from Lien Xiang, and if she wanted to leave, she would die along with the hunters and remain here forever. Liar turned to Fong Ning, who was experiencing something strange in the fog that created a ghost, and it felt like this formation was absorbing their power and she wouldn't be able to hold the monster for long, so she quickly needed to come up with some kind of solution. Fan Ning asked Lien Xiang if she knew any weak point of the monster, because she knew him better than anyone. Lien Xiang replied that the monster's weak point is the chest, and now that he is without the protection of spiritual power, he has become even more vulnerable, but it is almost impossible to get through the electromagnetic balls surrounding him. Fong Ning remembered that he had already been able to overcome this trap once, and as long as he was fast enough, he would be able to get close to the monster. With lightning speed, Fong Ning began to bypass the dangerous energy-charged balls, getting closer and closer to the ghost. For the monster, this was more of a suicide attempt than a feat, and he used even more of his strength to help the guy die. But Fong Ning was serious and had no intention of dying without first sending the monster himself to the next world. Having dodged all the charged balls, Fong Ning was close enough to deal a crushing blow to the monster, and without hesitation, he pierced the ghost through the chest. The monster was puzzled that Fong Ning was able to harm him so much, and the blow caused blood to pour out of his mouth while he screamed that this is impossible. The monster's power began to swell, creating an electromagnetic ball that carried a mortal danger. The concentrated charge, which the monster could no longer handle due to his injury, exploded, creating a fiery warm edge. For the monster, the wounds from Fong Ning turned out to be fatal and, exhausted, he fell to his knees, slowly dying. He muttered something about the girl Yanier, asked her not to leave him, and that he knew that his father was to blame for everything. With his weak hand, he reached out to Lien Xiang, trying to say something, but his strength left him too quickly. The last thing he said before disappearing was to apologize to Lien Xiang for taking her life. A portion of the ghost's soul moved into Fong Ning's sea of consciousness while Liar absorbed the power of his soul. Looking through fragments from the life of director Fong Ning, I realized that I was wrong about my first guess, and the husband had a wife and daughter. He had a beautiful wife and daughter named Yanier, with whom he lived his happy life and thought that it would always be this way. But his hopes were dashed after a car accident that occurred 15 years ago and divided his life into before and after. As a result of the accident, he was pinned to the driver's seat by steel bars, and his wife and daughter, by inertia, flew out of the car, crashing to death. Before the man's eyes, his loving family died, and the worst thing is that he could no longer help them. He was desperate and no longer saw any point in living until someone found him and took advantage of his broken heart. The man was confused and completely changed his worldview with his promises about the possibility of restoring everything and resurrecting his dead daughter. Fong Ning turned to Lien Xiang and continued to say that she was supposed to be the vessel for the resurrection of the director's daughter, but he was deceived and believed that committing suicide was part of the ritual. But in fact, his daughter's soul had disappeared long ago, and when he found out about it, it was too late, because he was locked together with Lien Xiang as a lonely soul. Fan Ning lowered himself to Lien Xiang's eye level and reassured her that at first the director really treated her like his own daughter, but his psyche could not withstand the cruel pressure and he ceased to control his emotions, becoming more and more domineering. After listening to Fong Ning, the girl asked if he knew any news about her parents, because she really missed them. Fong Ning said that after the first visit, he called the number listed in the newspaper, but it turned out to be invalid, and after that he went to the police station, where he was told that her parents had died, and he thought that they probably could not bear it too much, despair over the loss of his daughter. Lien Xiang politely thanked her saviors for freeing her from the mad ghost and bowed her head to express her heartfelt respect. Fong Ning laughed at the fact that the girl treated them so respectfully and said that she could just call him by his name without any honors. In the blink of an eye, the girl's condition began to deteriorate significantly and she felt that her end was approaching. Her body began to radiate spiritual power and she shone like a lantern, which confused Fong Ning, because he did not know what was happening to her. The girl calmly replied that she did not hold a grudge and her life was maintained thanks to the ghost of the director, and when he disappeared, even her own soul powers could no longer stay in her body and soon she would disappear. She added that there was no need to be upset about her death, because Fong Ning helped her quit and the opportunity to leave was her long-standing desire. For a second, she even felt a little sad that she wouldn't be able to see how beautiful this world was, but she was glad that she was no longer forced to kill people. Fong Ning was upset by this ending of the story and turned to Liar asking if they could somehow help Lien Xiang. Liar replied that this required something that could connect with her and use a lot of spiritual power to protect her soul. Fan Ning remembered the wooden comb that belonged to Lien Xiang during her life and thought that it would be suitable for this ritual. He took out a comb and brought it to Lien Xiang, so that she could bind her soul to it and stay in this world. But his plan failed, because nothing happened and the comb was as if protected by some kind of magic that did not allow contact with him. Lien Xiang was not upset at all, but only said that they would see Fong Ning in the next life, if the afterlife still exists. Before Fong Ning's eyes, the girl disappeared into thin air, leaving small sparks of light while he still held her comb in his hands. He irritably threw the comb, hitting the ground with his fist in global disappointment and despair. He burst into heartfelt tears because he had not kept his promise to save Lien Xiang and felt guilty towards him. All that was left of Lien Xiang was a comb lying alone on the ground, which could remind Fong Ning of her. But some kind of force began to radiate from the scallop, causing it to rise into the air. Fan Ning noticed Lien Xiang's comb flashing before his eyes and he didn't know what it could mean. With the help of her magical hairpin, Liar performed some kind of ritual that should return everything to its place. Opening her palm, she showed a little girl, Lien Xiang, curled up in a ball next to the comb. Fan Ning couldn't believe it, because he despaired of being able to save Lien Xiang, and looking with tear-stained eyes at her small copy, his heart was filled with warmth. Liar said that if her husband wants the girl to survive, then she will find a way to do this and she shared her power with her and this should be enough to preserve her existence. She added that the girl's soul power is still very weak and she will need time to recover before she can go out, and there is enough space in the comb to practice. After the lyrical part, Liar pinched Fong Ning's side so hard that he even cried out in unexpected pain. Liar explained that by saving Lien Xiang's life, she should still remain the only one for Fong Ning, to which the guy replied that at the time of her death the girl was only 13 years old and they could consider her their younger sister and not Fong Ning's mistress. Fong Ning gently took Liar's hands into his own and with trepidation sincerely thanked her for giving the girl the opportunity to survive. With a calm mind, they headed towards the exit, talking about how Fong Ning's incredible speed could be caused by awakening his own soul power without Liar's help. Fong Ning said that it was probably a space-time ability that could slow down one's own time 1,000 times in one moment and coordinate one's movements for maximum speed, which was theoretically impossible to achieve. Going down, Fong Ning added that it was similar to superpowers in the game, but Liar did not know anything about the video game, so this remained incomprehensible to her. Fong Ning also said that the moment he decided to take the initiative regarding the monster, a voice in the sea of consciousness told him the name of the skill that he should use and the name sounded like a dream for 1,000 years. Liar listened to the guy with rapture, and the name of the skill, Dream for 1,000 Years, gave rise to mixed feelings in her soul, as if it concerned herself. Looking at the unconscious three in the courtyard, Fong Ning thoughtfully said that he warned them not to come here and now they have this result, but he asked Liar if everything would be fine, to which she replied that several years of their lives had been absorbed, but they were okay, no threat other than a headache after waking up. Next to the unconscious guy lay a phone with the camera still on, and Fong Ning decided to move them outside the school so that they would come to their senses there. Leaving them at the entrance to the school, our heroes flew home to rest after the eventful events of today. As usual, they reached Fong Ning's apartment before sunrise, entering through the window. Fong Ning collapsed onto the bed with a smile, telling Liar that after meeting her, his daily routine was completely disrupted. Liar understood his fatigue and, taking off her clothes, also began to go to bed next to her husband. Seeing Liar's naked body, Fong Ning hurriedly began to stop her and stop moving, so as not to get a nosebleed again. He quickly ran to the chest of drawers with his things, carefully going through everything, as if looking for something very important. Having found what he was looking for, he told Liar that it would be better for them to sleep under separate blankets, placing her on the bed. Liar, in turn, was outraged by this behavior of her beloved, because she did not understand why he was doing this. Without waiting for any response, Fong Ning announced that he was going to bed first, leaving Liar alone with her thoughts. The girl had no choice but to lie down next to her under another blanket, and Fong Ning exhaled with relief that he could finally sleep peacefully. Meanwhile, near Haiyuan School, a trio of bloggers began to wake up after losing consciousness from the effect of the ghost's power on them. The leader of the group woke up first, gradually realizing where she was and how she got here. Having come to her senses, she taped her two friends to wake them up, although it seemed to her that it would be difficult to do, looking at their condition. Mocking the sleepy men, she said that breakfast had already been served, but one of them replied that they had almost died, and what kind of breakfast could they be talking about? The girl raised her head, looking at the sign with the name of the school, thinking about what happened yesterday and how they were saved, while the guys sat and looked at whether there were any wounds on their bodies. And then the girl began to remember some moments from last night, and her memories gradually returned. She asked her colleagues if the video they filmed yesterday, before the paranormal phenomena began, was preserved. They got the phone and Zhang said that the video should be there, but the guy said with suspicion that he remembers how the phone was still in Zhang's hand when they passed out, and now he took it out of his pocket, but Zhang waved him off and started search for video. They watched the last footage of the monster being bound by magical chains and Fong Ning standing in front of it. The three decided that only he could save them, and their lives were completely in Fong Ning's hands, which made their morale even more strained. But blogger Zhang was only interested in the fact that now he had a truly supernatural video that they could edit and post on the internet, which would definitely bring them popularity. While the grown men were rejoicing like children at their idea, their leader thought about the fact that Fong Ning's video really didn't have any special effects. That's why they looked so realistic, and the guy was actually fighting stupidity, but she didn't know for what purpose. Their guesses also plunged into the fact that the girl next to him could really be a ghost from the princess's grave. Meanwhile, Fanon was gradually waking up after a surprisingly long and restful sleep, which restored his strength. Sitting in bed, he thought that every time he woke up during the day, he felt as if he had lost something. He sneaked a peek at the other half of the bed, where Liar was still sleeping, to check if she had opened up during the night and exposed her body again. Wrapped in a blanket, Liar enjoyed the warmth and comfort of the bed, unaware that she was being watched. Fong Ning wanted to discreetly touch the strange amulet that Liar constantly wore on her head, but was afraid to wake her up. His intention was interrupted by a phone call that rang throughout the room, and Fong Ning hurried to receive it. Picking up the phone, he answered in a still sleepy voice, not knowing why they were calling him on the phone so early. It was Director Wang who called with the news that Fong Ning's video had already received more than 90 million views. Fong Ning replied that there was nothing special about it, but Director Wang countered that he was too modest. Director Wang continued that based on the number of views, the video was in the top 10 most viewed, and as a newcomer to this business, Fong Ning gained unprecedented popularity and is now being discussed by the entire internet. Not hearing any reaction to his words, Director Wang thought that something was wrong and asked Fong Ning, but nothing happened. Fong Ning hastened to reassure the director that everything was fine, but looking at Liar, he saw that the blanket had slipped off her body and all her charms appeared to his eyes. Liar muttered something sleepily, but Fong Ning thought that when she earned enough money, she would definitely buy a big house and give Liar a set of pajamas. Fong Ning's innermost thoughts began to flow out, and he thought that if this continued every morning, he would not be able to restrain himself for long. Moving from the bedroom to the living room, Fong Ning sat on the sofa, continuing to talk on the phone. Director Wang continued to say that they were offered a contract, but given the number of revisions and the amount from them, they would be able to profit from this agreement. Fong Ning incredibly liked this idea and ordered this contract to be signed immediately, because this amount was more than what he earned in a year on construction. After speaking, Fong Ning sat back tiredly on the sofa, thinking that by meeting Liar, he could earn a lot of money in just a few days. And it wasn't just about the money, because he gained access to spiritual power and soul magic and other supernatural things that he could not even imagine before. He opened the door to the bedroom, looking at the girl who had completely turned his life upside down. Although, remembering their first meeting, when she almost strangled him, he could not believe that she was so kind and sensitive. But now she has become an integral part of his life, and he will try to help her restore her memories, despite the fact that she may leave him after she remembers everything, because this will be her conscious choice. After entering the bathroom, Fong Ning continued to think that Liar needed more soul power or fear power to restore his strength, and therefore he needed to continue using the video to develop the stability of the fear power. He further thought that he needed to look for some local legends in which the same cases as with the ghost child or director Jiang could be hidden, but first he needed to wash his face, and then go and look for information. What he saw made his eyes nearly pop out of his head, and he thought that perhaps he was still in a dream. When Fong Ning wanted to wash his face from the wash basin faucet, instead of water, crimson blood flowed out, drenching everything around him. In a panic, trying to turn the tap back, Fong Ning realized that the blood would not stop flowing, no matter how hard he tried to stop it. Sweat was dripping from his face from the stress he had experienced in the last few seconds, because it seemed more like a haze than reality. Looking into the mirror, he held his breath at the unnatural reflection he saw there. His face was distorted, reflecting a bloody smile and black, bottomless eyes that radiated evil. Fong Ning looked at the darkest version of himself, who was reaching out from the mirror with her hand, trying to touch him. The ghost's eyes glowed green, as if looking into the innermost parts of the guy's soul. Fong Ning resolutely swung at the mirror and said to make this vile ghost disappear from his eyes. With all his might he hit the mirror, which scattered in different directions into dozens of small pieces. But this did not solve the problem, because from each fragment of the mirror the same ghost looked at Fong Ning. He grabbed his unbearably painful head with his hands, not understanding what kind of demonic behavior was happening to him. The guy realized that something evil and mystical had settled in the bathroom and decided to go to Liar for help. Entering the bedroom, he already began to address the sleeping Jiangli, but what he saw shocked him. A long dark corridor stretched out in front of him, illuminated only by the green fragments of a mirror with the reflection of a ghost. Fong Ning thought he was going crazy, because he didn't understand how this was even possible and what was happening to him. At the end of this dark corridor, he noticed some kind of animal jumping over the fragments of a broken mirror. His jumps from the rubble created green lines of ghostly light that followed the trajectory of the beast. Fong Ning decided to deal with this, saying that coming to his house and causing trouble was not a good idea. He reached out with his hand to catch the animal, but it seemed completely unattainable to him, as if something was holding him. The beast turned to Fong Ning, looking out for its sharp fangs, looking with one green eye, while the other hung on its cheek. Fong Ning angrily swung at the beast, saying that if he tried to attack him, he would die. But when he tried to hit it, the beast disappeared, and some black mud formed in that place, sucking in Fong Ning's hand. This dark mud began to suck the guy in like a highway, and he didn't know what it all meant and who was behind it. Then the beast appeared in front of him again, smiling and saying that the guy was simply deceived and it was a trap. Fong Ning felt that he could not move through the afterlife mud and his body seemed to be pierced by hundreds of needles. He tried to free himself with the help of his spiritual power, but everything was useless and he was increasingly engulfed in an unknown darkness. His body was powerless against the unknown devilry and he could not even resist being sucked in by an unknown force. The beast sat next to him and happily said that it was all over now, while Fong Ning was almost completely absorbed by the dirt. But suddenly the beast fell silent and Fong Ning saw that its head had been magically separated from its body. He opened his eyes with horror and realized that the dark corridor had disappeared and he was back in his apartment, but the strange feeling still did not leave him. From this entire morning nightmare, the only thing left was the dead beast that Fong Ning held in his hands as proof that it really happened. The monster's head was lying in the room, separate from its body, and Fong Ning was shocked that this unknown beast had almost killed him. By this time, Liar had already woken up and Fong Ning heard her calling him, but he was afraid that when he entered the room, he would again find himself in that terrible corridor. Liar went into his room, covered herself with a sheet and, holding her high heel, asked if the guy was all right. Fong Ning felt dizzy and almost fell off his feet, but Liar came up in time and held him back. Having recovered a little, Fong Ning asked what happened and Liar replied that he had just been attacked by a spiritual body. The girl added that fortunately she discovered this in time and was able to finish off the monster before it killed Fong Ning. Fong Ning went to the tap to turn off the water, asking what kind of soul body it was, and the girl replied that people like this monster were very skilled in psychological attacks. The monster's collar was still floating in the wash basin and Fong Ning said that it didn't seem like a wild spirit. Then why did the monster attack him? Liar didn't know the answer, but said that she managed to save him when the situation was critical, and if the monster's power had completely absorbed him, then even after saving it would have caused irreparable damage to his brain. Liar added in rage that when she finds out who is behind this, she will definitely deal with them, because no one has the right to harm her husband. Looking at the monster's collar, Fang Ning noticed a number on it and theorized that the attack was targeted by some organization. Looking away so as not to see the naked liar, he said that everything was fine and he would clean up here while she went to get dressed. Fang Ning swept the room and thought that if it weren't for Liar's help, he would probably have died here, and how good it was that she appeared on time. He also noted that after defeating the child ghost and director Jiang, he became overconfident, believing himself to be a Superman, but when danger crept close there and unexpectedly, he thought that his goal of becoming popular had gone beyond the bounds. Fang Ning analyzed that his thousand-year dream was only effective in close combat, and once he encountered some illusion or mind-controlling soul body, his power was useless. He thought who could be his enemy if not the patron of the ghost child or the director, but be that as it may, as long as the enemy is hiding in the shadows, the attacks will continue and he cannot just wait until he is killed. His thoughts were interrupted by the voice of Liar, who said that she had already gotten dressed, and he furtively looked to the side to make sure that this was really the case. For her look, Liar chose Fang Ning's blouse, saying that she wanted to wear things with her husband's scent. Seeing this, Fang Ning got angry, because he asked her not to touch his things without permission, so he asked her to take off his jacket, but she refused to do it. Liar began to run away from him so that he would not take her jacket, and while she was running away, a police business card fell out of her pocket. Fang Ning remembered that this business card was given to him by Captain Zhang when he saved his husband from the ghost child. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, its own story was happening, and a girl with glasses was out of breath coughing up blood. A man in a suit standing next to her asked her what was the matter and whether they had found who they were looking for. In response to the question, the girl disappointedly reported that her ghost had been destroyed and the case had failed. This information shocked them, because the Een squirrel was a 4th-level soul and she could easily cope with 5th-level hunters if she concentrated on mental attacks, and the girl confirmed that she almost killed the hunter, but something went wrong. The girl continued that at the last moment some terrible force appeared and killed the Een squirrel in a second. She sat on her knees and made excuses to Chan Baidao that she really tried to carry out his order, but she shouldn't have happened like this. With tears in her eyes, she begged him to help her, because she was now powerless against the soul hunter. Chang Baidao leaned down and lifted the girl's face by the chin, saying that he knew that she tried her best. However, he further said that Director Jiang, who was sent here as a formation observer, had been eliminated and someone should bear responsibility for such a heavy loss. Before killing the poor girl, he added that without the Een squirrel, he now does not need her and she herself is of no use. After feasting on the girl's head, Chang Baidao turned around and walked away, saying that the organization had never supported useless people and it was not his fault. Chan's servant Baidao asked how it could be that Director Jiang had been successfully hiding for almost 10 years, but suddenly he was attacked by a soul hunter and took away important test subjects, so did he really find out about their plan? Chang Baidao replied that this matter should be addressed to prevent the soul hunters from spoiling other aspects of their plan, and the identity of the hunter himself should be carefully investigated. Disappearing into the magical portal, he added that he would definitely find the hunter and he would pay with his life for their losses. Meanwhile, the sun had already fully risen and illuminated the entire city, spilling onto every part of the terrace of the cozy establishment. Captain Zhang sat carefree at one of the tables, looking over notes in his notebook while drinking a glass of water. The bell on the front door announced that someone had come inside, and it was probably the one the captain was waiting for. It was Fang Ning who made an appointment with the captain, and upon entering the establishment, he saw that the captain was already there and waiting for him. The captain didn't know why Fang Ning needed the meeting, but curiosity prevailed and he agreed. Fang Ning placed Yin Squirrel Collar in front of him and asked him to find out everything he could about this organization, but the captain reproachfully asked if he called him just to find information. But looking closely at the collar, the captain was in shock and with horror could only say that it was bottomless darkness. Fang Ning did not understand what this meant and delicately asked the captain to explain it to him in more detail. Before telling anything, the captain asked Fang Ning where he got this collar from in order to understand the scale of the threat. Fong Ning calmly replied that last night, an ugly squirrel-like spirit came out of the mirror in his bathroom and attacked him, but when he killed it, the body dissipated, leaving only a collar with a sign. After listening, Captain Zhang said that Fong Ning must have recently awakened his spiritual power, otherwise he could not kill the squirrel and not know anything about darkness. Fong Ning agreed with him, and the captain continued that he actually managed to survive their attack and, having awakened his strength, he probably realized that the world is not as simple as it seems. He noted that in this world there are ghosts, spirits and other entities that are born with the ability to use the power of the soul, but ordinary people mostly cannot see them, but spirits can still harm them. The power inside the human body is called spiritual power, but it is usually very weak, but some people are able to somehow hold a lot of spiritual power within themselves, which allows them to create different abilities, and such people are called ability users. Most people, possessing spiritual power, awaken it from birth, and only a tenth of people awaken in an incomprehensible way at a conscious age. People and souls are divided into 8 levels, depending on their energy reserves, and souls of higher levels can suppress souls of lower levels. However, soul levels consist of souls from levels 1 to 6 and 2 special levels, such as Soul General and Soul King. Fong Ning was surprised that he had never heard of this before, and the captain replied that the world of ordinary people should not know about the existence of monsters and ability users for the sake of their safety and peace, because not everyone would take it calmly. The captain continued that the country has mastered methods of testing newborns, and if any abilities are detected, these people are noted and registered with the government after birth. Once they reach the age of 16, they are contacted and invited to join an official company of soul hunters. Fong Ning was interested in what would happen if they did not agree, and the captain replied that their memories were changed, their abilities were blocked and allowed to live an ordinary life, and those who agreed were trained and sent to different parts of the country to help regulate supernatural situations. Most paranormal situations are caused by soul creatures born from resentment, but there are also monsters with special abilities and all sorts of threats. Fong Ning noticed that there should be quite a few hunters, but looking at the number of supernatural situations he had encountered in a few days, he did not see soul hunters doing this. The captain replied that this was due to the increase in paranormal activity and the purge of hunters, many of whom were killed or injured, and in addition, the situation that occurred 40 years ago caused a serious shortage of hunters. Changing the topic, the captain said that it was worth talking about a group of people who were more dangerous than spirits and alien species. Fong Ning was surprised, but the captain explained that among those people who have natural abilities, there are people like Fong Ning who awaken later, and until they openly show their powers, they cannot be identified. Some difficulties in life, humiliation and rejection by society can give rise to strong evil in a person who awakens his powers. These people hide among ordinary people and their powers go beyond the limits and go astray, but before there were fewer such people, because any threat was posed through monitoring and immediately eliminated. These people use their abilities to take revenge on their enemies, and subsequently they go crazy from their superpowers, unable to control them. But the emergence of a mysterious organization 40 years ago changed everything, because they caught people who had awakened their powers, and also penetrated the official organization, agitating many timid hunters to join the ranks of their group. The captain put out his cigarette and added that 40 years ago, the soul hunters experienced an internal conflict, which significantly undermined their strength. Until now, the organization sets traps for soul hunters, and no matter how the authorities try to expose them, to this day they have not been able to find out the purpose and location of the secret organization. To gain power over the world, the organization uses the most brutal methods, one of which is the artificial cultivation of souls in captivity. Taking the collar in his hands, Fong Ning thought that it was probably an artificially created soul, and the captain agreed with him. The captain added that he had already seen this collar and the number on it before, so he was sure that it was the darkness that attacked Fong Ning. But Fong Ning did not understand why he was attacked, because he is not a hunter of souls and does not even communicate with them, to which the captain replied that most of all Fong Ning simply interferes with them or interferes with their plans. And then Fong Ning remembered Director Jiang and thought that the organization must have had plans for him until Fong Ning destroyed him, incurring their wrath. The guy asked if there was a way to find them, but the captain sadly replied that if they knew where the organization was, they would have closed it down long ago. The captain added that they had already caught several participants, but they had soul magic cast on them, and as soon as they heard the key words, they died from the inside. To make it clearer, the captain explained that soul magic is a power from the lip of the soul that produces unpredictable effects, and among ability users, only a select few can wield it. Fong Ning actually didn't need this explanation, because he knew what spiritual skills were and skillfully mastered them, so he considered himself one of those geniuses that the captain was talking about. But the captain continued that skills are difficult to master, but it is a natural instinct of humans and alien species, and they can directly manifest the power of their soul skills, and that is why it is difficult to be a hunter, because you never know what the skill of the next enemy will be. Fong Ning asked angrily, if he couldn't understand the monster's soul skill, he could just passively defend himself. The captain advised Fong Ning to join the Soul Hunter organization, because it uses protective barriers. It is almost impossible to break through, and he will be under official protection. Fong Ning did not like this idea, because he awakened his powers with the help of Jiang Li, and if she regains her memory and decides to leave him, she can take back his abilities, and this needs to be explained to the organization somehow. The captain noticed his concern and asked if the guy had any secrets that he didn't want to tell him about. Fong Ning only politely said that at the moment he could not join the organization and hoped that he would not have his memory erased and his life controlled after this. The captain replied that usually all those who awaken late are controlled by the authorities, but he trusts Fong Ning and hopes that he was not mistaken in letting him go. He also added that he remembers how, at their first meeting, Fong Ning was tracking a ghost that was doing evil to people and also saved her husband from him. With that, the captain handed Fong Ning a strange golden card, and the guy asked what it was, and the captain replied that it was a freelance certificate for the organization, and those who did not want to accept the seal of ability could join as freelance members after passing the assessment. The captain added that with this certificate, he can use his abilities without threatening or panicking others, but if he encounters dangerous entities, he must help the local hunters overcome them. After finishing his coffee, the captain said that he had told everything he knew, so Fong Ning needed to be careful. As he walked, he added that all the necessary information was on the card, and if the guy changed his mind, let him inform him about it in advance. Confused by such a vast flow of information, Fong Ning stood up and, looking after Captain Zhang, asked him who he was. Without turning around to the guy's questions, the officer stopped and thought about what to answer. After a pause, the captain replied that now he was just an ordinary policeman and continued to walk towards the exit. Fong Ning sat back at the table and thought about the captain's words, and the thought came to him that perhaps he was a retired soul hunter. Looking at the notebook, Fong Ning thought that he had found the right officer and at least now knew who his enemy was. He picked up the information card that Officer Zhang had given him, and it began to shine with a blinding light. An image of Fong Ning appeared from it and informative phrases began to fly out, and the guy thought that this all looked unreal and just for those who have the ability, so that other people would not see it. It was written on the card that he was now a freelance soul hunter, but this was visible only to him, because spiritual energy is inaccessible to ordinary people. He was already heading towards the exit, thinking that a simple policeman could not know so many soul hunters, much less get him into the organization, so he was not so simple. On his way out, the waitress shot him and asked him to pay the bill for the drinks he had drunk. Fong Ning was stunned by this information, because he had not ordered anything, especially for such a large amount. He began to make excuses that he didn't even swallow water, but the waitress said that this was the order of his friend, who said that he wanted to talk about something important and that she would not bother him. Fong Ning was angry that the officer pinned his account on him, and now he understood why he was in such a hurry to leave himself as an expert. Leaving the coffee shop with Liar, Fong Ning thought to himself that the threat from darkness was very great and Jiang Li needed to be restored to strength as quickly as possible. He asked her if there were any other ways to restore her strength besides eating delicious food and absorbing the powers of fear, and she nodded her head thoughtfully. He again asked if there were any specific mechanisms or rules for possessing the power of fear, because one needs to look for a more effective source than watching videos or broadcasts. Liar replied that it was their voices and grievances that caused fear, and the stronger the mood swings, the greater the power of fear, thanks to which she would restore her soul powers. Fong Ning thought that he could open a fear room and Liar would scare people there, thereby absorbing their fear. He quickly dispelled this idea, because opening a haunted house requires a lot of money, as well as PR, and it's not a fact that anyone will come back. They continued to walk along the road, talking about ways to renew their strength, not suspecting any danger. The preoccupied man, in a hurry, did not notice the people in front of him and crashed into Fong Ning so that he flew away. Fong Ning hurried to help the man, because he felt guilty that he was hit so hard because of him. This was the same man from the alley that Fong Ning saved from the ghost, and when he saw Fong Ning, he broke into a sincere smile. Fong Ning did not understand his incredible joy, because he did not know who exactly he was talking to and asked with curiosity who he was. With undisguised joy, the man said that he was very glad to see his savior again and emphasized that if the guy had not appeared on time, he would probably have come to an end. The husband had long wanted to get in touch with his savior, but did not know how to do it, to which the guy replied that now he would know his name and this would make the search easier next time, because then the man was clearly in a hurry. Sadness appeared on the man's face and, with a heavy sigh, he said that this was a very sad and long story. However, he invited his savior Fong Ning to a nearby cafe to buy him coffee and talk about what was bothering him. It was the same establishment with a very attractive and luxurious look in an understated, modern style in dark shades with wood elements. Zhu Tanhua wanted to please and politely asked what his guests would like to drink since Fong Ning was with Liar. Fong Ning noticed his concern and eased the tension by telling the man to order the same for them, and in his head he thought that there was a funny coincidence with the choice of cafe because he had already been here the day before. Zhu Tianhua turned to the waitress standing nearby and ordered 3 identical drinks, thanking her in advance. Fong Ning thought for a moment that this is probably the most expensive coffee in this establishment, since Officer Zhang himself recently drank it and for which he had to pay. Zhu Tianhua again began to remember the story of his rescue and the fact that he did not even have time to thank his savior, because he lost consciousness and was no longer found in the hospital, but Fong Ning wanted to get closer to the essence of this meeting and did not comment on it. Having finally decided to have a serious conversation, Zhu Tianhua said that he came here in search of an exorcist and accidentally came across Fong Ning, who was an expert on this matter and could advise something effective. Fong Ning was surprised by his request because he believed that he had already helped the man last time and until now he had not encountered any other supernatural events. He even became a little angry from the information he heard, and his eyes lit up with a bright hellish flame of spiritual power. Zhu Tianhua said embarrassedly that the situation does not concern him directly, but it happened recently in his company, to which Fong Ning asked for more details to understand if he could help with anything. No longer able to contain his emotions, Zhu Tianhua hung over the table and shouted words of gratitude for the kindness and patience shown to his situation, while the waitress had already arrived with the prepared drinks. A little embarrassed that the waitress had witnessed his emotional outburst, Zhu Tianhua smiled and apologized for the noise he had caused. Remaining polite, the waitress placed their drinks in front of the guests and went to serve other tables. Fong Ning noticed Liar that it was the first time she had seen such a drink and was surprised to inhale the smell of something so strange and unknown until now. Noticing her surprise, Fong Ning mockingly whispered in her ear that everything was fine and she could drink it without fear. The girl obeyed her husband and began to taste the contents of her cup with caution and curiosity. Watching the girl, Zhu Tianhua thought that she was inadequate and it was very strange that she was wearing a talisman on her head, which he had not noticed before. The girl really liked the drink and enjoyed the pleasant taste, not paying attention to the strange glances in her direction. The man then changed his mind and agreed that it was probably okay to be a little special around an expert like Fong Ning. Zhu Tianhua began his story from the moment he got to the hospital and gave a statement to the police representative, after which he hurried to his company. The husband clarified that he is the owner of a company producing virtual games, which has recently suffered from a crisis, and in order to save itself from decline, it was decided to invest all resources in a new game, which was already at the last stage of testing, which Zhu Tianhua could not do for anything skip. Testing was carried out taking into account all the nuances and monitored the player's health in order to avoid unpredictable consequences and improve the game's storyline. Having once again checked the serviceability of all devices, the quality of the broadcast and the condition of the tester, the technologists moved on to their work and testing was launched. At the beginning of testing, everything was normal, the character behaved naturally, the interface corresponded to the idea and nothing suggested trouble. While in the simulation, the character received a command to start the game and he headed towards the door that should start the gameplay. Once inside the game, the character was frozen in place by what he saw and realized that something had clearly gone wrong here. In the game, he saw an exact copy of their office with all the employees, as if this was really happening and he just happened to be at his job. Looking at the screen, the technologist was also surprised and concluded that this game was modified because they had definitely not developed such office scenes yet. At that moment, an eerie red spirit appeared on the screen, filling the entire surrounding space of the office. Angry with the developer, Zhu Tianhua walked up and grabbed him by the chest, demanding where this scene came from if it wasn't in the project. The technologist went to the computer to check the original game code to fix the error, asking the director whether it was worth suspending testing, to which the director replied that he needed to wait and see who was doing all this. Such a test takes a lot of time, given the complexity of the encoding, and the owner went into the observation room, noting that everyone should monitor the tester's condition while he took the latest recordings from the cameras. Telling this to Fong Ning, it was as if he was there again and continued that when he learned about the changes in the code, he wanted to check the surveillance cameras, but he didn't know that something even worse would happen at that second. They discovered that in an empty office the computer turned on by itself and began typing something on the keyboard, and this greatly frightened them. Not understanding the nature of these events, they wondered how this was even possible and who was behind it. Realizing the anomaly of what is happening, the director decides to immediately cancel the test and goes to the tester's room. If only he had known then that, upon returning to the office, he would see an even more terrible picture than he could have expected. The tester connected to the simulation was literally burning alive under the influence of electric current, and the entire room was filled with smoke and the terrible screams of an exhausted guy. Zhu Tianhua did not understand what was happening and why the testing was out of control, so he became angry and ordered it to be stopped immediately. The equally frightened developer muttered that there was a ghost in that office and it was probably his work. Hoping to save the tester, Zhu Tianhua ran to him to disconnect him from the faulty equipment. Guided by emotions, he tore off the tester's helmet, not worrying at all about his life at that moment. From his reaction and facial expression, one could understand that they were late with the rescue and the accident turned fatal. However, although the guy was in terrible condition and suffered greatly, he still showed signs of life and had a chance of salvation. Zhu Tianhua ordered to immediately call an ambulance and his ward went to carry out the order. He was still shocked by this situation. After this incident, many employees quit, and further development of the game was paused, and if that guy continues to be haunted by ghosts, then all my years of hard work will be in vain, Zhu Tianhua complained. He continued that he did not want to just sit and wait for his death and began to take certain measures to preserve the team, letting them all go on vacation while he hired an expensive exorcist, who from the very beginning aroused suspicion about his expertise. Fong Ning noticed that in the exorcist's arsenal there were too many things unnecessary for that ritual and the name Zhizhang sounded too provocative. Zhu Tianhua had no doubt that his opinion was correct about this specialist, and he immediately guessed that there was no smell of skillfully done work there. Having started his work, the exorcist assured that everything was under his control and no problems would arise. Having finished the session, the exorcist said with a smile that it was just some kind of bastard and he turned him into ashes, but the frightened faces of those present noticed something strange behind him. Behind the exorcist appeared the same red figure with flaming holes instead of eyes that was in the office on that ill-fated day. And then fear filled all three, including the master charlatan himself, who convinced that he had lost the evil spirit that had settled in the office, and Fong Ning was not at all surprised by this ending of the story. Zhu Tianhua added that at first he planned to meet another master in this cafe, but when he saw Fong Ning, he realized that this was fate and a master like him would definitely have dealt with that ghost if he had been there instead of that rogue. Trying to put even more pressure on Fong Ning, the husband began to feel sorry for himself and talk about what if his company collapses, and his wife leaves him and takes away his son and much more, but Fong Ning is already tired of listening to this. He interrupted his boring story about the end of his career and said that he would help solve this problem, but on one condition. The guy began to come from afar and said that he is usually very busy and it's not a fact that he will find time for this, but there was no need to explain for a long time and Zhu Tianhua understood everything. He put a bank card containing 50,000 on the table and said that by solving his problem, this money would be a reciprocal gesture of gratitude for Fang Ning. Fang Ning reacted violently to this proposal, but thought that exorcism could be beneficial not only for him, but also for Lyre, who would have the opportunity to restore her strength. Zhu Tianhua thought that such a reaction was caused by a very small amount of reward and said that this service would be equivalent to another saving of his life. He added that he would be able to give another 20,000 from above, but only when the launch of the new game resumes, because the company is now in a difficult financial situation, but Fang Ning did not demand money from him because he knew that they were destined to meet anyway. In a serious tone, Fang Ning said that if this problem bothers Mr. Zhu so much, then he will immediately solve it today as soon as he finds out the company's address. They part on a positive note and Fang Ning adds that Mr. Zhu should not forget to reset the bank card password along with the company address. Fang Ning from Lyre reached their destination when it was already dark night outside and in front of them stood a huge building that seemed to touch the heavens. With a victorious call, Fang Ning raised his hand up as a sign to go fight for his money in battle with the monster that had infested Mr. Zhu's company. Continuing in the same vein, the guy said that they came to establish justice and drive out evil spirits and in support of Lyre added that they would destroy them and feast on something tasty. Fang Ning relied on the abilities of his companion and asked her what level the soul was in this building, to which she replied that it was probably the fourth and no better than their previous find. Therefore, charged with enthusiasm, our heroes headed to the building with the ghost to eliminate it once and for all. By attaching the card to the sensor, they activated access to the entrance to the building and this meant that there was no turning back. With a good mood and awareness of the scale of this whole action, which would gain a huge number of views on the internet, Fang Ning began recording the video.